Hi, welcome to the Dumps, the place for all your sign needs. Um, I go by a new name now. I don't know if anyone knows about this, but I am Pazuzu. There we go. Anyway, hi, it's me again, but I'm here with a new guest. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Ketchup, your friendly neighborhood film reviewer. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
I likes the movies.
Do you like movies? Oh, you're on the wrong podcast for that. Whoopsie. But yeah. Anyway, so we're here to talk about a franchise that well, at least the first movie I'm very connected to, um, The Exorcist, which is based off of a novel written by William Peter Blatty, and you think, oh yeah, I remember the first movie, I remember that one. That's a great movie. Or maybe you thought it was boring. If you do, you're wrong by objective fact. But that's your opinion. I don't give a shit. But there's also the
You,
sequels. There's the sequels. I
uh,
I
and prequels. Don't forget about the
and the
prequels.
prequels and the requels and the reboot. But that's
Well, there's technically two reboots
there's
because all
well
three of the sequels are not actually like sequels of each other. They're all the
they're all the
sequels of the first
it's
film.
it's a conf-
It's weird.
it's confusing as all hell. But you don't think you'd think about that. I don't think the normal, like, average moviegoer would think about, oh yeah, right, I remember The Exorcist the beginning. Maybe they saw it once, but they completely forgot about it. But we're here
I've
today to talk
never
about
heard
them.
anybody talk about beginning or Dominion. It's like people only ever talk about the Heretic 3, and now there's a new one now, so people are talking about that one. Even
Yeah,
then, it's getting overshadowed by Saw and Taylor Swift and all other stuff happening.
there's a lot of stuff going on right now, but we're choosing to talk about the Exorcist sequels, which most people don't even think about nowadays. But everyone still thinks about the first movie, The Exorcist, directed by William P. No, what am I thinking? William
Friedkin.
Friedkin. He is now sadly gone from this world, but he is remembered not just for this, but as well with the French Connection and Sorcerer and various other projects. And this is probably his most popular film by default. It was like the highest grossing movie of all time back in 1973 or 4.
It
And
was 3.
yeah, 3. And um well, it's like, well, it's obviously the best movie of the whole franchise, but I'll let you um talk about it for a bit.
So, The Exorcist is probably, given all of the horror movies that have come out over the course of the past 50 years, I think it's probably the most famous and culturally significant out of all of them.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
you see, it is like the basis of every single possession movie that has ever come after it.
Pretty
Any
much.
movie dealing with the exorcism wants to be like The Exorcist. The only exception if you want to is if you want to be something unique like The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which is going to be a little not like that. But it
Mm.
also takes a completely different approach of telling its story in comparison to like the Pope's Exorcist from earlier this year.
Well,
Uh,
yeah.
and on top of that, it's like so many moments and scenes and ideas shared inside of this movie has synced into popular culture for the longest time. You see all this stuff
Hmm.
satirized and parodized all the time,
Let's not forget
usually
the
with
the
loving.
Leslie Nielsen starring movie, Repossession. Great movie, from what I've
Hmm.
heard. Definitely. But yeah, as you said, it has a major impact, not just in horror, but in cinema in general. And well, yeah, it definitely deserves it. It's not like a film that is completely reliant on the fact that it was so innovative. It is just a great movie based on a great novel written by William Peter Blatty. who apparently wanted to make the novel into a film. But, at first he saw the novel as it allows you to imagine these things without having to, I guess, think about it. But William Peter Blatty, he thought of it from an objective perspective because if you take it to film, he thinks that you are seeing what you're seeing, and that's what he wanted. He wanted someone that could make the film through a documentarian approach, and well, he got William Friedkin right off of the Best Picture winner, French Connection, and originally the transcript that was sent to him was one of the first choices. He went for William Friedkin for those reasons, and William Friedkin did not like the screenplay, the transcript. In fact, he thought it was total garbage and that it explained too much. And so he just got the book, which William Friedkin already liked, and basically chose specific things that he wanted to take to film and that could be filmed. And that was just sort of the basis for the actual script that was made, which is now in the movie itself. And yeah, it shows that it has a lot more faith. I haven't read the book myself, but I think that at least I hope it's a faithful adaptation, especially since I'm pretty sure even after like I think they fell out, like Blatty and Freakin like fell off for a bit until they re-released the film in the 2000s, known as the version you've never seen, which I actually watched this time. Um,
Is that the director's cut version?
yeah, the director's cut version, quote unquote, even though the director's cut is the theatrical cut. Yeah.
Mm.
Which version did you watch?
I've seen both of them. I watched it
Yeah.
initially on Max at the beginning of September, I think.
Mhm.
And then it got re-released in theaters
Oh yeah, for like a day or so.
the 2 days. It
Mm.
was the Sunday and Wednesday 2 weeks past.
Yeah.
Uh, so I that version was the director's cut, the one that was put into theaters.
Mm.
But what I'm assuming is the theatrical version is the one that's on Max, since
Yeah.
that's the one that's 8 minutes shorter. Uh, it's missing a couple of scenes and extra moments that were included in the theatrical version I saw.
Yeah. It had all the faces. Those are great. Yeah.
Hmm.
And yeah, what are your general thoughts on the movie itself?
I think the film is legend. It's fantastic. It stands up to its legendary status incredibly well to this very day. It's
Mhm.
definitely one of those kinds of movies where it does start out kind of slow.
Mm.
And it did take me the longest time to really get into the film because that prologue sequence really just does kind of drag on a bit in my mind. I
That's.
think it is important looking back on it later on in the film as seeing
Mhm.
it as a way of introducing to us the character of Father Merrin initially. So
Mhm.
just having him come out of nowhere and as this contrast to Father Karras, I think it builds up his character a bit more interestingly
Mhm.
and effectively.
Yeah. No. When you're introduced to Father Merrin, it's actually like besides that prologue, he does not appear for a lot of it. He appears later in the film, like near the third act, and the fact that they introduce him, that's perfectly fine with me. While yes, I agree, it is a bit slow in the beginning. I think the fact that it's so ominous and doesn't allow you, because it's sort of just that specific prologue sets you up to the fact that you do not know this demon. You may see like a statue of it, but it just stares at you. You don't know what exactly it is, and the fact that that prologue is so slow just makes it a lot more ominous than it already is. For the fact that it's the opening, there's no explanation to the actual main plot yet, and
Hmm.
the way they introduce Pazuzu and that shot, because the opening shot is that sunset, and that's like a perfect opening shot because it fades in once we see Pazuzu again, and then we realize that sunset is meant to represent the darkness that will soon become later in the film. And we don't know exactly how Pazuzu would get from there to where Reagan is, but we don't really need to because it's just the fact that the presence is there is what makes it effective. because the film,
It's not needed to be explained.
yeah,
In some ways, the mystery of the stretches of this demon's powers is part of what creates such a fearful tension in the film.
yeah, no, the fact is, some things really are just unexplainable in this movie, and it's better for that. The fact that it doesn't need to explain itself, and the things that it does explain is done with subtle, small pieces that later become an overall picture. And yeah, it definitely is gonna be not like aged well for modern audiences since we have less of an attention span, and movies aren't usually that slow paced anymore. But it's for the movie itself, even outside of that time period, it works for what it is.
Yeah,
Um,
and
as for like the actual main plot, I think the fact that Reagan is, purely innocent at first. Chris McNeil, they're both out on this summer home because she's shooting the film, and Reagan just gets to stay at this large house. And while she's at shoot, as she comes home, Reagan mysteriously gets this possession. We don't see the possession. That's the most important part. We do not
the
see it.
most of like some kind of indication and hint as to how it happens is the scene that's also shown this early on in the movie of
Hmm.
Reagan messing around with the Ouija board that she
With
found in the back
what was
closet.
her name? Howdy Cowboy or whatever his name was. Uh, that character, or like her imaginary friend, that just seems like, it's fine. It's just an imaginary friend. But then that later becomes a much more meaningful part, or maybe it really means nothing. We don't know. Maybe
I
it's
mean,
just
kids mess around with the occult all the time.
well,
When I
yeah, oh
was a
yeah,
bit
definitely.
younger, I had a friend that always liked trying to get us to do Bloody Mary in the mirror and all that.
Hmm.
Uh, I never ever did it because I was way too of a coward back in the day.
I wouldn't have done it either. But yeah, of course, this seems so normal, and the fact that it is so normal is what makes The Exorcist so effective because it has these small bursts of like actually terrifying shit. Well, the third act is obviously just all of that like combined together. But even in that final act, you're like there's an up and down to it. Where there's some downtime in between each action taken, and with this, you're just there's it makes those much more weirder moments stand out more because of the fact that the rest of the movie seems normal. And people get this reputation that this is like the scariest horror movie ever made. And
Allegedly, at one point, it was. I
it
know that there
was.
were a whole lot
It
of
was.
reports that people were actually sent to the hospital
Yeah,
due to how scared that they got into the
so I,
theater.
I I did
Uh,
look through some footage, and man, the marketing for this movie and the fucking audience's reaction are just priceless because it's from such a specific time period where most Americans were Christian based, and second
this
of
was
all,
not all that long off of when the Hays Code was sort of
yeah,
being moved to pass.
yeah, no,
Uh,
because Psycho first shot of a toilet. That's like amazing. That was like a fucking innovation. And now we're at this point where we're just desensitized to violence. But back
like
in
there's
1973,
blood, there's violence all over the place. There's
yeah.
a whole lot of profanity being thrown out.
Oh yeah, no.
Uh,
The N word's been getting way more normalized lately, so it's like, yeah, it's like a normal thing. It's weird. But yeah, in
uh,
this in back in
I think
1973,
she actually says
it's just
like is either like the hard F or the hard R. I can't quite remember inside
yeah.
of the hospital, one of the hospital scenes.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Uh,
sure. But uh, your mother sucks cocks
Normally,
in
I
hell,
would be
that type
very
of
much
shit.
against that, but at the same time, I'm kind of okay with it here just because it's a demonic force being said
Yep.
here. I think that's a lot why this stuff, this desensitization was being more accepted here because it is still inside of that Hays Code era ideals of good versus evil and good triumphing over evil in the end, even if there are dastardly consequences in the end.
Yeah, because the ending is basically saying to have more faith and to not just say faith, but to also enact on that faith by making a sacrifice and by doing it for a greater good. Because Father Marin does not know who Reagan is on a personal level, but he still did this exorcism because he felt sympathy towards her mother, Chris, and as well, just a general evil like that, you really just have to do something about that. And it
It's
doesn't
already
matter.
alluded to early on in the movie that he has experience exorcising demons. He's written a book about it. He's on his way to write another book about his discoveries in Iran. And he's here pretty much just because he sees a tormented, innocent life, and he considers it his own personal sacred duty to help out the innocent as part of his belief and faith.
Max von
Father
Sydow.
Karras is the one
Yeah,
that
Father
actually
Karras is the
has
one
more of a
that's
personal
like
connection.
more conflicted because while Max von Sydow is excellent in his role as Marin, he's a lot more of a developed character off screen already because he's experienced these things already. But Karras has not done an exorcism before, and he doesn't believe in exorcism. But you know, just as much as Marin does, he still feels sympathy for Chris as well and her situation after a bit of time and a bit more of a trial and error thing before we get to the main iconic Exorcist third act of it all. It's people always forget that, but it's like very important to get that context to truly feel the impact of when Karras, sacrifices himself to get to exorcise the demon out and then to kill himself in order to fully destroy the demon for it to not to harm anyone ever again.
Yeah.
And
And I really love the contrast as well that the movie makes between Marin and Karras. I think the lack of genuine character development placed on Marin works, specifically because of how much of a contrast he plays towards Karras. Karras is this very emotionally driven character that feels conflicted with his faith because of all the torments that he's seen in everyday life,
yeah,
and he's very much a volatile character. He can't stand on his own straightward at a complete angle, while Marin, on the other hand, is a very stoic character. He has seen this kind of evil firsthand, and he is very much in line with his faith. Uh,
yeah. He ultimately is just conflicted on these things, and the fact that he lives in such a broken neighborhood. It's a more rural neighborhood. That also adds to more of the effect, and that's not even paid attention to. We don't see like a full, because we see like these kids hanging out in like the garbage cans around this dirty neighborhood, but we're not focused attention to that. That's just an additional detail to it all, and that overall picture really adds to the atmosphere because as much as we like to pretend that while Friedkin was a realist because he was a documentarian filmmaker, he really still was a showman because if you've heard him talk or even speak alone, he has that showman attitude. And if you've seen his documentary, well, I saw it, The Devil and Father Almaroth, that was like specifically very. It's kind of like if William Friedkin made a Ghost Adventures episode. It's it's really phony, but it's kind of funny in that way because I think Friedkin truly does believe in the spirits, but also he likes to embellish things a lot of the time. The infamous story of Exorcist II test screenings where the execs were ran out of the theater, that probably was a tad exaggerated. I don't think all of that happened. I mean, probably some of that did happen, but still, that was probably an embellished story by Friedkin because he was the one that originally told it in like 2013. So, yeah, for as much as we believe that uh, Blatty was looking for like a documentarian filmmaker, he just wanted to make the exorcism itself believable, not that the that the director didn't believe in it. I mean, of course, he was like, oh, yeah, I don't want someone to believe in this, but he just wants them to make it seem believable. But Friedkin, I think he truly did believe in it. And that sort of duo really added to the believability of everything. And plus, the fact that Friedkin slapped one of the actors in order to get that pure reaction of when I forget which father, I forget his name, but his character name, but he was like shaking his arms over Karras's dead body as it was bleeding out. But that's just a genuine reaction because his hands were actually shaking from the slap. And then of course
Oh,
there's Chris McNeil's actress, I forget her name. I'm off the top of my head, but she when she gets thrown on the ground, that's just actually her in pain. But then Freakin told the camera operator to pull into that right before she got sent to the hospital. They kind of
yeah. Didn't she like fracture her wrist or something?
yeah, if she fractured her wrist, that is an actual scream of pain from her during that actual take that's in the film, which kind of disturbing to think about. But they kind of laugh it off in the documentary. It's weird, but yeah, it's its first time because 70s were very much in vein of the auteur director, which was later killed by Heaven's Gate and a couple other box office flops. But that's for another time. But for now, like
Yeah.
Freakin was just able to be like, yeah, I'm just gonna abuse my my people in order to get a more believable experience. Which, while yes, creates a better final product, I'm still conflicted on whether or not to still be fine with that, but times have changed, and we can't do that anymore. Although I will say, Friedkin did not, in fact, hurt Reagan intentionally. Reagan's actress, and that's the best outcome of all this. Nothing bad happened between them, because well, really, I think Friedkin truly wanted to believe in this girl, because I'm pretty sure the original directors who were hired to make it, the first movie, some choices were Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick, and also the director of The Graduate. But that guy, Mike Nichols, who directed The Graduate, he said, "There's no way you could find a girl that could carry that motion picture." And it's like, yeah, no, you really need to have that specific actress in order to fully communicate. Because children acting, that usually doesn't go well. But somehow, a 12-year-old Linda Blair impressed Friedkin, and he trusted her in order to create a performance. Because Reagan can turn into Linda Blair in just a split. Because somehow, I guess this girl just had the talent, which that's just lucky talent, and it shows on screen. I don't think there have been any accounts of her abuse. Even in Exorcist 2, I'm pretty sure she was like having a wonderful time on set. Apparently because she did like the script at the time. And second of all, she wanted to work with the priest in that movie. I forget who that guy's name was. Uh,
I
um,
don't think any of us know what his name is except for the Exorcist II cultists.
yeah, no, Scorsese could tell me, but he's not here. Yeah, Richard Burton. He played a Philip Lamont. I definitely remember him. But yeah, that dude was only there. Richard Burton was only there for the paycheck. So yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if everyone was secretly only there for the paycheck.
yeah,
It's
but
like
yeah,
Linda
but
Blair, she probably enjoyed the script at the time, but I think she also enjoyed the money more.
yeah, but yeah, she also enjoyed the fact that Burton was there because she just liked Burton as an actor, so she wanted to be able to, I guess, work with him, and that was like she says it's one of her favorite acting experiences in her life. The actual movie, well,
Should we move into that?
I want to hold off as long as possible.
Okay, so in that case, I just want to mention that I love Linda Blair's performance inside this movie.
Oh,
Just
she's great.
the way that she can just switch on a whim from the innocent Reagan to this possessed monster is
Yeah.
so incredibly impressive. The physicality that she had to get across, it just boggles my mind that she didn't really suffer any major injuries in performing that stuff. It's like
Look,
when she's shaking her entire being back and forth on the bed, she had to physically do that.
yeah, she had to physically do that. Even though that was like the only time she's been hurt during the set, I don't think it was like meant to be intentional. It was just like, the whole idea of the stunt was already dangerous in of itself. And it came out with good results because I'm pretty sure she says
Mhm.
like one of the crew's names in that take that's in the film. So yeah, she was just generally asking for help during that part. So that's tad,
Ugh.
tad bit creepy. But that's I can
It
still
gave us
forget
an
that.
amazing result.
He gave it
And the
gave
same
amazing
goes for
result.
the levitation scene as well. Like that just continues to shock me with just how impressive it is. But it also must have been a pain to get across.
It's a
Because
pain
like
in
I
the ass.
know it was done using wires, but I can only imagine like getting your entire body held up by wires for like what, a
Multiple
minute or
takes.
two,
Another thing is
multiple
that was
takes
like
of doing so.
that's a cold room. So the takes they had to do were very specific because to keep that room cold, that movie was shot in the summer and that specific time was shot in the summer. So they had to fully like cool the room, but the lights could could remove that because they wanted that breath. So they had to make the room very very cold, but it couldn't stay cold for a long time. It could only stay cold for about like 10 minutes or so. So they could do only one or two takes, and then they had to wait for the room to cool back up. And it's just like that drew out the process. And even like a Warner Brothers executive visited the set at the time and was thinking, why the fuck is it taking so long? And then he sees all this, and it's like, oh, okay, I guess that's happening. And uh, there's so many impressive effects, especially in that final act. There is the point where she's spinning the head. The spinning her head, I did not know that it was actually just like a plastic head. That was an actual plastic head that was just molded out of her face. I didn't know that it was just. I thought they just had like the body and then just her going through it, and there's like a hole for her to fit her head in. But no, it's just that's just actual plastic head. It looks very believable. But
It's a very impressive model.
because you can tell in that shot she's like breathing the cold air, and you can see it. The original testing like thing did not have that. It showed just no breath at all. But they specifically added this specific machinery in order to produce that breath. And the fact that they put attention to detail to even in the breath, that shows how much dedication there really was to this film. There was just a lot of respect in the entire production, and even though the set burned down and the multiple deaths that happened after with the supposed Exorcist curse, it still came out with a great final product because everyone disciplined themselves and everyone respected what was happening. They all Friedkin respected the source material when Linda Blair disciplined herself, and the rest of the crew dedicated a lot of time in order to produce the film that they made. And yeah, it definitely shows. I highly doubt that no other horror movie could be better than this for me. This is like the quintessential horror movie for me, and I truly think it's a perfect movie.
I just, yeah, I mean, I think if anything, I respected mostly for its technical prowess, all of
Mm.
the practicality being used. Certain shots, as mentioned, are just jaw-dropping. And then some others that I've learned about recently, it's like that final shots with Father Karras on the stairs. Yeah, they got an actual stunt individual to do it. It wasn't just a dummy that looks like Father Karras. An actual person jumped out the window and rolled down those stairs, which
Yeah.
were platted. They were plated with padding all the way down, but the padding was also incredibly thin. That way it
Oh
wouldn't like show through the stairs. It'd actually look authentic.
no, it's
So it was a very dangerous stunt to get across, and I believe no stuntmen were injured in the process of making it. But
yeah.
man, I wouldn't be able to do that.
I could not fucking because apparently I've heard from the Red Letter Media review of the original movie. Yeah, those actual stairs they feel apparently very hollow, and it feels like you could easily fall off of them. So very odd to think. I could probably visit those stairs, like if I visited Washington, but I don't think I'd have the guts to go up those. Those are
The
apparently
next time I'm
very
at
like
DC, I'm gonna take a photo op over there.
it's
They're way smaller in person than what the film makes it out to be.
yeah. But if you look at it from the top, it's a bit disorienting. I think.
It's incredibly daunting.
Yeah. Um. But yeah, another thing is yeah the makeup. Like I said, very good with Reagan, but
I
also
love the design that they went for with the demonized Reagan so
yeah.
much.
Have you seen like the screen tests of like the other designs that they tried to go for? Like
I
it's
don't think I have.
one of them looks like Reagan's like an old hag. It's really weird. Like X. I'm trying to figure this out because the Exorcist Reagan screen. Because they these looked really weird to me because they just had different designs and I just can't imagine it not looking like the way it is now. Hold on. Yeah. See, it's they just looked weird before, but you know, with the design we got, it's just like I feel like it's the perfect resemblance of evil in like the best way possible. I don't know how else to
Yeah,
describe it, but
it, it's just masterful. I also learned very recently that apparently the story is also a slight criticism towards medical practices at the time as well,
yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
primarily through the medications, the medical scenes, and how resistant they are to actually give McNeil uh, any sort of like genuine help
Yeah,
for Reagan from a mental perspective, and they keep on insisting that there's some physical issue with her.
yeah.
Uh,
That's actually the most scary scenes in the movie. Just those medical scenes. They're so, because the fact that Friedkin has such a documentarian style makes all of them feel so real, and it's
yeah, in the director's cut version, they extend one of the most extended sequences that they did was when they were giving her, when they were doing the blood clotting on her.
oh,
And
is that why it felt longer for me? Oh yeah, that must be
yeah,
right. Oh,
which very much triggered my own personal trypanophobia
oh,
because I hate those medical needles so much.
yeah, no, those
And
suck.
they lingered on that scene for so long. And yeah, oh man, it hurts just thinking about it.
Yeah, no, I for as much as the movie is really fucking good, I don't think I can often rewatch this movie as much. It is my favorite horror movie, but I cannot like
I wouldn't
rewatch this one
necessarily
often.
say that it's like a bad thing on the movie, but it
No,
is
the fact that you can't
definitely
rewatch
like,
some movies is fine because, well, yes, rewatchability is cool, and that's what makes some movies better. Sometimes that one-time experience can really mess with your head. It sucks.
yeah, hmm
I I really just appreciate a lot of how like the filmmaking slowly gets less documentary. It's not that it goes out of it because the exorcism itself is portrayed with such realism, but also the fact that
Friedkin is clearly like trying to present the exorcism in a much more cinematic lens. He really wants to put
yeah,
emphasis on like the
it's
horror and the danger that this particular activity imposes, which we'll get to in a future movie that disrespects this scene entirely.
yeah the famous poster shot of the movie is so good because there's such an exaggerated amount of lighting, but also it's still so ominous and real because you see that car drive in pure darkness and then you see this flash
The,
of light and it's like oh my god,
the fog is cloaked around the house,
it's
just
so
giving it
good.
this very ominous and evil feel.
Yeah, and the shot where Reagan's on the bed moving her hands around like in prayer, and then the flash of the Pazuzu statue like comes in and then in a flash and then fades away in the smog is so good. There is so many good shots in this movie, and as much as we think Freak is a documentarian, like I said, he's a showman, and the final act of this movie is definitely a way to sort of show the example of that. And I think the fact that he blends that type of documentarian style and the fantastical elements so well is what makes me appreciate Friedkin far beyond the basic stylings that people always say about him. And yeah, I can understand why people would faint during the movie because some of this can feel too real. And yeah, I still think the
I
movie
mean,
is
the
still effectively
Vatican
scary.
they tried lobbying for this movie to receive a NC-17 rating in order to prevent any and all children from seeing it in theaters,
Yeah.
which it really just emphasizes that they believe that this was like a very accurate depiction of exorcisms and demonic possession.
I mean the fucking hospital scenes. Those include actual neurologists and actual people, the actual doctors. And the lighting in those scenes were just natural light from the hospital themselves, so it was just much easier for them to shoot. And speaking of which, one of the neurologists apparently murdered people, supposedly. Like, they actually committed murders, and they only found this out after shooting. So
Oh,
that's great. Then there's the camera operator whose baby fucking died while on shoot. Then there's well, of course, uh Father Dennings, the first one who falls off those stairs, is the guy who plays him. He died a few days after he shot all that.
oh
So,
my.
God, oh God, that's like it's the actual man who fucking died, which is parallels to the movie itself. That is terrifying to think about. Well,
I
yeah.
I thought the production of Wizard of Oz was bad.
Well, a lot of it is indirect, but the fact that so many people died. There was a couple of actors who died only 2 years after the movie was released. That's weird to think about. Like, then there's the fact, the production set burnt down. That one's a famous one. So that's even weirder that the house, because apparently just a bird flew into like the electrical unit and so it just burned down everything else except for Reagan's room. Except for Reagan's room somehow. So
Uh,
that's weird to think about. And people say that this movie is cursed, which adds to the whole legacy of this movie, which is what most
the
people think of.
notorious legend, I would probably say is best. I've heard that. There's one of my teachers and a friend of mine, they refuse to see the movie because they're too scared by all of the cursed things that have happened as a result of its production, seemingly. And I mean, I can't entirely blame them for that mentality.
Yeah,
Actually, watching it, I don't think it's particularly scary by modern standards.
I'm scared
Uh,
by it, but not in the traditional way where it's like, oh, I'm more
it's
scared of the implication of everything because it's like such a malevolent force that you can't begin to comprehend it in a
Yeah, the
logical
concept
way.
is definitely the terror there for me. It's kind of like watching the Nightmare on Elm Street movies where they're not particularly scary, but just the concept of like Freddy Krueger going into your dreams and killing you that way is that's
Yeah.
what makes me an insomniac.
Yeah, and another thing is the soundtrack and sound design, because apparently they spent several months on the sound design for this movie. The neck turning of sound was apparently made of opening a really old wallet. So yeah, and there's just particular sound design choices that makes the whole film terrifying as well, because there's such little soundtrack that when sounds happen, it makes it more scary.
It's very somber and quiet to really emphasize this idea of isolation and
Yeah.
dread. We get the only like a truly original song I'd say that was made for this is the first act of Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield.
And that's
Uh,
a full
re-
album that goes into many different directions after the sample that they took.
it's a
And
very progressive song. Um,
yeah,
the actual piece that everybody knows of really doesn't show up all that often.
it shows up in one
Uh,
scene where Chris McNeil is walking. That's it.
at the very beginning of the movie, and I think it's about a minute of the full track, and then the entirety of the first act of the film of the song gets played in the credits.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, apparently they got some other people to try to do the soundtrack, but only parts of that soundtrack appeared in not the movie, but in the trailers, which those trailers are
Mm.
infamous. Specifically, that music was used in the one that had all the flashing images, which was apparently banned because of its terrifying usages and actually caused problems with like seizures. And obviously, it's a very good trailer for its time, and they were definitely a lot more weirder than most advertising back then, especially for a horror movie. Yeah,
But
it's
unfortunately, they didn't have the 2020 hindsight of the Porygon episode of Pokemon.
they did not. Oh well. Oh, that you just reminded me of that. That was great. That's great. Yeah. Um.
Only ever aired in Japan because it caused kids to have seizures.
Yeah. No.
Fun
The.
times.
Yeah. No. The. That. What was the composer? Yeah. That composer that he Friedkin denied was literally the same guy who did the Psycho soundtrack, the Vertigo soundtrack, and the North by Northwest soundtrack, and also the guy who did the Mission Impossible theme as well. He denied both of
Oh,
those guys,
wow.
and I think.
I mean, ultimately, I think going down with Oldfield was probably the best choice for this because,
Yeah.
like, I cannot think of any other track that just encompasses like the eerie feeling of The Exorcist quite like his composition.
It's so
And
good.
apparently, it's also the entire album itself.
Yeah.
Mike Oldfield is the only person that did it. Like he played every single instrument
Yeah, no, apparently
and
like
mixed them all together.
he still worked on the soundtrack after. Like he did revisions and once there was new like forms of audio recording, he updated it to that form of recording and then to another form of recording and it just endlessly got updated. And so I don't even know what the modern version of Tubular Bells sounds like anymore. I don't know if I want to attempt to search that up. But yeah, the original track is great, and the rest of the minimal soundtrack is good for limited times it's used. The credits music is good, I guess, and yeah, no, mostly it is carried by the fact that there is no soundtrack, which is good for some films and is good for not so good for others. But yeah, I think that's all I have to say. I don't know if you do.
Uh, yeah. I mean, this, as mentioned before, this film has really marked its place incredibly well in popular culture. It's been satired all the time. SNL did a spoof of it called Exorcist II, I think back in the 90s. It's one of, in my opinion, it's one of the best SNL skits that they ever did. Some really, really funny gags that pay tribute to production elements. Like there's a bit with pea soup.
Oh,
There's the person posing for Chrissy. She has a broken arm. Uh,
yeah.
there's a Mandela effect that a lot of people have with a particular insults that Reagan throws out. Apparently, a lot of people think in the TV edit version, she's instead made to say, "Your mother so sucks that smell." Nope. This SNL skit is the one that brought that in. Which the ultimate resolution of the skit being that both of the priests just strangle her to death because she insulted both of their mothers is just so funny. Uh, Shrek also did a parody of
The
it called The
Shrexorcist.
Shrexorcist
That's a
inside of
great
the
short.
Scared Shrekless anthology
Oh
TV
yes, I've read that.
special.
Yeah.
It's also just so funny. I loved it back in the day when I saw it as a wee lad, and I love it even more now that I actually see like all of the references of outside of just I knew about the opening image in front of the house and all that, but now knowing like the whole thing with the head turning and the
Yeah,
floating in the air and the stairs. They brought in the stairs.
they did. It's so good. It's weird that
Uh,
those stairs are associated with the movie so much, and yet
mhm.
it's with the version you've never seen cut. That's
I
weird.
feel like it also just this short also segment does also still bring in another Mandela effect that I have with the movie because I swear oh, I've always associated like the possessed child crawling on the walls and ceiling as being like the Exorcist thing, but no,
No, it's
it
it's
doesn't
not.
happen in the
No.
movie.
Yeah, no. I think it's
Uh,
just because Exorcists are so generalized into it's the Exorcist's fault that all these like possession movies are like that. But no, it just kind of branched off into different directions.
Yeah, I really think it just all comes back to what I said by every Exorcist movie wants to be like The Exorcist.
Yeah.
And then, there's also a student short film I found called The Extra Twist, which is like The Exorcist, but a bunch of the characters are candy, and it's cute. A really cool little student thesis project. Nothing more, nothing less, but it's all really cool legacy to this film has left behind, just like from an artistic standpoint, seeing all of these artists giving their own little interpretations of this amazing and iconic masterpiece. Uh, and I know for a fact that all of these people had to have had some kind of love and passion for this movie because you can see the love and passion for the source material in all of these projects. Hopefully, they don't. WB isn't stupid enough to get somebody who does not like The Exorcist to direct its follow up. Oh, oh wait.
Well, before we get there, before I'm just trying to get so far. I have a couple more fun facts.
Lay
William.
him on us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, there is a. I was gonna talk about Denise Nickerson. They were in Willy Wonka, and they could have been Reagan. There was actually a lot more older actresses that were gonna be Reagan, but they just went with the perfect girl for it. So that's even stranger. And like I said, Blatty and Friedkin had disagreements, and Blatty didn't like the removed 12 minutes, which is why the version you've never seen exists because they came together, added back those 12 minutes as promised, and they released, which that's great. And I have a I have a free two free kid quotes. I'm not a convert to the occult, but after all I've seen on this film, I definitely believe in demonic possession. There are things that cannot be treated by medical or psychiatric means. He told this to like a magazine once. And you know what? I'm gonna end this off with like probably the best quote imaginable that perfectly recaps the movie because I think Friedkin knows his best because he's the one that directed the movie. It's not a movie about Dracula. It's not a film about an alien. It's a film about people who live up on a street. It's about a real street in a real town with real people living in it, in a house, and upstairs, on the third floor of this house, is a real little girl who happens to be possessed by a demon. And then there's Exorcist II, the Heretic.
Which is not about a real girl in a real house. It's instead mostly about locusts. Just like another movie that's not supposed to be about bugs, but is about bugs.
And there's
That
also
also
in a
shares the
franchise that
title
shouldn't be a
within this
franchise.
franchise.
Ah, my god.
Uh, I'm like, there's so many parallels one can make between The Exorcist and Jurassic Park,
Yeah,
and
no,
it's so
I'm starting
weird.
to realize this. Both had a major culture impact. Both did not need to be franchises. One of their movies involves locusts. Um, there's
Both of them are sequels that are based off of sequel novels written by
yeah,
the original author of the original story, which was also based off of a book.
yeah.
And the originals of both are heralded as being some of the best in the genre,
Both are hailed
period.
as some of with the best visual effects in the medium.
some of the
So,
best acting, just in
yeah,
general, some of the best direction out there. Just
yeah, that's weird.
so weird.
I did, see, I thought you wouldn't notice, but I did too. It's like, okay, wow, there's just a lot of parallels here, and yeah. But see, unlike Friedkin, I don't think Spielberg actually cares. Although Friedkin does care, I think.
Freakin kind of cares. I remember seeing a quote that he said on in regards to this movie. Uh, Actually, I think Hal even actually mentioned this at one
Yeah, he
point.
mentioned this in his review. I don't have the quote on me. I have a lot of fucking notes on this.
He specifically said, I was at Technicolor and a guy said, we just finished a print of Exorcist II. Do you want to have a look at it? And I looked at half an hour of it and I thought it was as bad as seeing a traffic accident in the street. It was horrible. It's just a stupid mess made by a dumb guy, John Borman by name, somebody who should be nameless,
Nameless.
but in this case should be
He'd be
named
named.
Scurrilous. A horrible picture.
I love Freakin' so much. Every interview he does, I laugh. I miss him so much. But yeah, he hated this, and apparently he just didn't watch any of the other sequels. But he did say on what was it on, you know, the latest one, Believer. I know we're skipping ahead a bit, but he
Yeah, I saw that one as well.
yeah,
He said that.
he said the guy who made those new Halloween sequels is about to make one to my movie. The Exorcist. That's right. My signature film is about to be extended by the man who made Pineapple Express. I don't want to be around when that happens. Oh, that hurts. But if there's a spirit world and I can come back, I plan to possess David Gordon Green and make his life a living hell. Oh, I love this man so much.
I, in all honesty, I hope that Freakin' at the bare minimum came back and just like made him 5 minutes late to work.
I hope so. That'd be so funny. I miss I miss Free Kid for every part of his being. He's just wonderful man.
He is so silly and so funny. Uh,
I miss everything about
and
him.
I know that Peter Blatty also made some comments on this movie. I don't have them on me
I don't think
in
I
the
do
same ways
either.
that I think he read the screenplay for like 10 minutes and he asked, are you really sure this is what you want to do? With a follow up to The Exorcist. And the producers are like, yes, we don't need your input. Uh, I've heard that apparently he
Oh,
wrote the follow up novel uh, Legion
Legion, yeah.
in retaliation to Exorcist II. And then he proceeded and was like, okay, I don't want this stain of a movie to be the following legacy of my film
Yeah,
adaptation of
I'm pretty
my
sure.
beloved
No, I'm pretty
classic.
sure Legion
So
was meant.
I'm gonna direct my own version of my own novel.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Legion was like originally written as a screenplay, but then turned into a novel, and then got turned back into a screenplay. So yeah,
That would make sense.
it was always destined to be sort of a movie anyway. So
Which good riddance, because Exorcist 2 is so bad. It is
it is as
miserable.
bad as its reputation says it is. Everyone hates this movie except for Martin Scorsese.
Well, there's like this cult of people that believe that the movie is good. Like Comrade Yui likes this movie
Silent
on
Dawn gave it an
Letterbox.
8 out of no 4 out of 5. Yeah, that's
Matt Matt likes this movie.
uh,
Just spewing out a bunch of nonsense, saying quintessential good, something like that. I don't even
wait.
know.
No, let me read this
Uh,
review verbatim. This is like one of the most nonsense reviews of all time. I think it'll always be remembered in my memory. A Satan's EST session, a quintessential Borman freakout. Base urges, arcanic beliefs, sober rationality, false prophets, wrong martyrs, new technologies, all existing in the same psychic space and time, always in flux, just like these amazing sets, the stunning miniatures, the Morricone, the goofy giant locust composites, Burden's absurd histrionics, what a perfect weirdness.
By arcane beliefs, do you mean the part where they cure autism, which is like the most 70s thing that this movie could possibly have?
Oh yeah, no.
It's like,
For those who haven't watched this movie, Reagan is the Lord and Savior of our world and stops autism.
yeah, just she cures autism.
Yeah.
Uh, Apparently they just need to bring Reagan over to my house and I'll be cured from all of my troubles or something. Like, what the? So, like, The Exorcist, the original film, is like so incredibly timeless. Its messages about faith and good versus evil, and the criticisms towards the medical field, they're all timeless ideas. They're going to persist throughout the ages. 50 more years, no doubt. This this
It's
is this is the most 70s thing possible to just say, yeah, autism is a disease that we need to cure. Literally, autism speaks and endorsed thing right here. Jesus Christ.
it's a movie that takes. It's not claustrophobic. It's in fact in a hospital, mental hospital made of mirrors and windows. It's really stupid because I don't understand what architect would make this look like that, especially for a mental hospital where there's so many patients and you don't want these patients roaming around nor seeing other patients or else bad shit would happen. That's like standard procedure. But no, there's in this movie there's a mental hospital made of fucking mirrors and windows, and it's meant to be symbolic, but it's also really, 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 really fucking stupid. So yeah, that's great. That's just fun. And
Uh,
man,
I mean, it's also like really important to just mention, like, off the bat, for anyone interested in knowing why is this movie just in concept broken, is because John Borman, the main director of the film, it's technically listed as a dual project between Borman and Rospo Pallenberg. But as far as I can tell, Pallenberg is more so just like a second-hand kind of individual on these projects, someone who's like just looking over the script and just acting as a yes man, because I can't find anything on him in
yeah,
comparison to
the
Borman,
only
where
other movie he's credited as directing is Cutting Class. That
which
I, I, there's three people who have rated it. Two are 4 out of 10s, and one is a 6 out of 10. So
I
it's probably not worth much. So let's not dwell on that. Let's not dwell.
is not important. What's important is that we do have like an official reasoning behind John Borman as to why he dislikes it, which is allegedly because he felt that the storyline was cruel towards children.
Yeah, no. So what he said is he wanted to make the opposite of The Exorcist because he thought the original film was about tormenting children and that it was a disgusting dark movie that had no hopeful message in it, even though that's the exact opposite of what the movie is actually about. You dumbass. You did not read
Like,
into the film. You did not
I'm
understand the
not.
film. You're
I
so
am
bad.
absolutely one for criticizing a movie for having good intentions but really terrible execution with its ideas. But like, it inherently does not do anything remotely close to showcasing child torture. The most you can see is
At most you
like,
could say is lick me scene, but you barely get much out of that because it's like a forceful,
or maybe like this one of the scenes like with Reagan of ripping at herself and throwing her head back and forth and stabbing
but
her
mostly you
of
see the aftermath. That's it. Like
yeah,
it's
it's not
not.
super graphic because again, this is 73. There's only so much graphic visuals that we still can show before the audience. It's just like, I can't take this. This
Yeah.
is a way more sanitized era of humanity in comparison to nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But like, no, this is this is not a cool movie towards children that lacks any hopeful message. It's not. Pretty much anyone will tell you that, aside from like the people who have incredibly strong hate boners towards the original film.
Yeah. I found this quote by Borman on the Wikipedia page. What he said was basically, it all comes down to audience expectations. The film that I made, I saw as a kind of rip roast to the ugliness and darkness of The Exorcist, which, by the way, is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. He also said, I wanted a film about journeys that was positive, that about good, essentially, and that audiences in hindsight were right. I denied them what they wanted, and they were pissed off about it. Quite rightfully, I knew I wasn't giving them what they wanted, and it was a really foolish choice. So yeah, he does blame himself, but he still thinks that he's creating a better movie because he's basically demonizing audiences by thinking that they all just want to see a little girl being tortured. When no, that's not what The Exorcist is about. And to continue the quote, he I didn't. Oh, hold on, let me try backtrack. But yeah, the film itself, I think, is an interesting one. There's some good work in it. But when it came to me, I was told by John Cayley, who was running Warner Brothers then, that I didn't want it. Look, I said, I have daughters, and I don't want to make a movie about torturing a child, which is how I saw the original film. But then I read a three-page treatment for a sequel written by a man named William Goodhart, and I was really intrigued by it because it was about goodness. I then saw it as a chance to film a rip roast to the original picture, but it had to be one of the most disastrous openings ever. There were riots, rightfully, and we recut the actual prints in theaters, about 6 a day, but it didn't help, of course, and I couldn't bear to talk about it or look at it for years. It is he
What
deserved
the
that
hell?
backlash, and even when he's like apologizing, he still does not understand the movie. So that's just even better, right? That's just even better. And it sucks because even Linda Blair was like, "This was one of the biggest disappointments of my career," and even Borman commented, "The sin I committed was not giving the audiences what I want," like he said before. And this book that where this comes from just offers no answer as to why Exorcist 2 failed, even though there is a clear reason why this movie failed. Even if it was a moderate box office success, it's not comparable to the original film's box office success. And plus, it just sucks. It's a bad movie. So
It's like, just accept the fact that you made a bad movie. It's not exactly that you're not giving people what you want. Exorcist 3, if I'll actually argue, kind of runs counter to a lot of the ideas that the first film expresses, but it is beloved by so many people today just because it is a really good movie that expands on some of those ideas in really interesting ways. You, Mr. John Borman, did nothing in terms of expanding the ideas of the original film. You do nothing of interest inside of this movie at all. It is nothing but boring slog and plot points that make borderline no sense at all.
yeah, it's
The
just
most
complete nonsense.
satisfaction that I could possibly get out of the movie is like the admittedly cool sets and makeup and miniatures and all this, that kind of technical stuff, which even then it's not as impressive as the original film or other movies being released at this point. And James Earl Jones, because James Earl Jones is a good actor.
James Earl
But
Jones
also,
talking about Locust was really weird, but you know what? It is a highlight of the movie. It
but
really
another
is.
thing I must also mention is this movie came out in 1978. You know what other movie
Well, it
starring
was 77, but
James Earl
yeah,
Jones?
yeah,
Yeah, 77, my mistake.
yeah.
You know what other movie released in 1977 starring the voice of James Earl Jones?
Uh,
Star Wars.
oh, oh wow.
You could have
Huh.
seen that instead.
Well, yeah, most people did, so.
Pretty much everyone did instead.
So, what do you think no one fucking talks about Exorcist 2? No one
I
does.
have like this
Besides the fact
funny
that it's
little
bad.
headcanon belief that like James Earl Jones was originally supposed to have a much bigger role in the movie, but then he got like a call from his agent saying, "Hey, so George Lucas has this new movie called Star Wars, and he doesn't really like the current voice he has for the big villain of the movie, and he wants to use your voice to portray this character. Would you like to do it?" And James Earl Jones just ditched the rest of this movie to pursue Star Wars.
The best decision of his career. If this was all he bet on in his entire career for fucking Exorcist 2, the Heretic, I think we wouldn't know the name James Earl Jones. We wouldn't know him.
Absolutely not. If he just allowed himself to sit in this
Garbage
muck,
movie. Trash.
this oh,
It's such a gross movie. This is such a fucking gross movie to me.
I just like don't understand why are we focusing so hard on locusts? I understand that like the idea I think Borman is kind of going for is that like locusts have like a religious background tied to them. I think pretty much anyone who has seen The Prince of Egypt knows very uh absolutely knows of like the fact that it was one of the seven plagues sent by God to the kingdom of Egypt.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
but
it's just so vague because you're like, and plus the editing is horrendous. They keep switching back and forth between these things, but there's no cohesive rhythm to it, and when it cuts away from it, it just allows the film to feel slower than it already is because you have these long stretches, and then once you get back to the main plot, there's so many quick cuts, quick cuts, quick cuts, and it's like you're not allowed to absorb what it's trying to say to you or what it's implying to you. So you have this very disorienting experience where you're not really understanding what's going on. And the setup for the actual plot is stupid. So let me explain the plot. Um, so Reagan, of all people, is actually the one who's traumatized by The Exorcist. When I think Chris McNeil would be way more fucking traumatized from that.
well, like I can understand both of them being traumatized by the experience, but why are you placing all of your focus in just Reagan
And another thing
when you could
is,
instead focus on both?
they don't trust these institutions anymore, but yet they go to do experimental hypnotic therapy. That seems a bit out of character to
What?
me. Like,
It's like, did McNeil's blowouts to the medical field when she was trying to figure out what's going on with Reagan mean nothing?
I guess it didn't because they do these fucking stupid ass things. And apparently, Pazuzu isn't out of her body, even though the ending of The Exorcist. I guess that means nothing either, because it's back, and it's
I guess
really.
he just jumped back into her body immediately after, but decided to like Halloween ends Michael Myers style, just hide in the back corner until the very end of the movie.
And another thing is that for some reason, of all things, they go to therapy for this. Why would you go to therapy? Didn't you learn already? Like I said. And then there's the fact that she somehow is just like fine with this, and we can see like the physical appearance of like the demon, and it looks nothing like Linda Blair. You can obviously tell that's a fucking double. It looks really bad. The special effects are really bad, and I don't know if it's just me or does it feel like the movie is shot so flat. It feels like there's no depth of field to everything, especially in those like
Like
mirror
I feel
hospital
like
scenes.
I wanted to believe that like the people praising this as an underground special gem of a movie were like seeing some kind of like special avant-garde kind of storytelling and direction in it, which that's how it's painted by some of these people. The top letterbox review for this movie by Mumbles says John Borman makes a terrible sequel to The Exorcist, but an excellent quote Italian horror. But like
No,
I've seen clips of Italian horror films in the past, and yeah, those have like particularly interesting styles that's not reflected in this movie. It literally could be it could be directed by someone at Marvel.
Let's not forget how they said the exorcism made her worse. How the fuck does that work? And another thing is they ask about how Reagan remembers the Exorcist when she was possessed in that time. Why would she remember the damn Exorcist? And even if she did, how is that gonna help you do what? I don't understand. And for some reason, so I wrote down this in my notes, but
And as
Marin,
much as uh,
but yeah,
I just
what were you gonna say?
sh she's not this. She's not the same. Well, okay, so I can kind of understand the idea of her remembering some of this stuff because the movie does depict her being subconsciously inside because of the help me message on it. In some ways, depending on your perspective, a believer
Maybe.
of getting ahead of myself, but believer ending and saying that what's her name does not remember anything is actually uh it actually like retcons
Was it the
the
black
original
girl or white
movie.
girl? Just say that. is it the is it the black girl
I,
or white girl? Who was it? I
I
forget.
I think it's the black girl, but
The
her
one who
name is Angela,
survives.
I think.
Angela. Okay, Angela and Catherine, right?
Catherine. Yeah,
Catherine. Right,
yeah.
right, right. Okay. I'm not racist. I
Uh,
swear.
I just the movie that move we'll get to it eventually, but that's also Abyss, and I remember all of the stuff just because it frustrates me so much. But like, give me 3 weeks and I'll forget about it, just as I did with Exorcist II.
I'll try to forget Believer as much as I can after this. Don't worry,
Um,
man. I forget most of these movies
um,
after this. Good God.
but like, I can understand looking at the perspective of her remembering the exorcism because it is half implied that she was
Sort of.
consciously aware of things going on. Maybe, potentially. If anything, that would be like a cool thing to explore inside of a sequel to The Exorcist. Whether or not she actually remembers this stuff and how much she remembers this stuff, and her maybe trying to move on from this stuff, but also having to use her knowledge of this experience in order to combat a new evil. If we're really going to make a sequel to this movie, which is not needed in a direct sense,
Uh,
that's probably the best angle to take it.
yeah, that's what I was
None of these
thinking.
sequels do that.
But yeah, it's so bad at it because you already set yourself for disaster by, oh yeah, Reagan goes back to a experimental psychological hospital. Like, wow, what a great idea! What a great idea! Because they do say they want to keep her safe and mentally safe. So why do you send her to a mental hospital? I
I can
just don't
understand
understand.
some like keeping her mentally well, but like wouldn't it make more sense to like hire a personal psychologist to come to your home instead? Because you do not trust these people. Like in Kimmy, she does not trust the outside world. So she doesn't go into the outside world until she's forced into the outside world.
Uh, yeah, but yeah, the first hypnotic scene is really stupid because they're trying to take control of her and to like find the demon inside of her, but then the demon like comes out of her, even though it's not how the Pazuzu worked before. First of all, I guess she's it reflects in the mirror, but I don't think that makes sense either. And it's
So
weird how awkwardly it's like paced and presented, because it feels oddly sexual. It's weird because they have like these weird noises that the demon makes, and it sort of sounds like they're having an orgasm. And the demon Pazuzu proceeds to touch Reagan's boob and then massages her, and it's like really weird. I don't get what's going on there. It's a tad strange that you have this, and it makes the whole experience feel even more awkward. And it was really weird to watch it while in VC with Silvermania, who was also on this podcast. So that's great. I don't know how to make of that. I don't know what you think of it, but
oh my God, actually, Reagan is 16 years old as well.
uh, I think she was 17, Linda Blair, when filming this, because that's I think that's when. So that's a tad weird. And
Still 18 is the legal age.
Uh,
Mm.
and then there's I only have random notes because my notes are basically sort of a progression. They're not professional, so basically a progression of me going more insane as the movie goes on. So the next part is apparently there was a burning fire in the house, right? And for some
Mhm.
reason, the father is just like standing in it, and then they asked to call the ambulance, even though there's a fire extinguisher that could easily burn this small fire. But no, then it just grows super large, and then basically it's all their fault that the fire grew larger. Fucking idiots. And it basically wasted the hospital's time that they had to call, but they already extinguished the fire by then. So wow, what a waste of time. I don't
Oh,
get that. And that's meant to be like a spiritual event by the demons. And I'm only now like recalling moments from this movie. I don't know if you remember much about the movie, but
I
now I'm
remember
starting.
fragments of it. Really, the only thing that sticks out to me is the climax because, like,
It's so
that is
bad.
like it's at least like uh, it's something, I guess. Like, I guess I was just so starved for anything in this movie that I'm willing to say, well, at least the climax gave us something. I think that's like the minor justification that I gave for liking it over the newest one. But then again, everybody reminded me of the autism curing scene, and so now I'm actually like questioning, do I like it more? I
Uh,
I don't know.
I
I
do
really
think,
don't
I
know.
do think this is the worst Exorcist movie, but still, like,
At this point, it's
uh,
I you know what? At this point, it's not even worth like trying to say this one is better or this one is worse. They're both bad, and they're both abyss fiction, and they're both not worth anyone's time.
do you like this? Do you like the way they shot the fly perspective scenes? Me and Silver joked around that it looked like the fly was fapping in front of the camera. That's kind of what it looked like. It was weird. I don't get that shit.
I just I don't understand any of the stylistic choices here.
Let's not forget. Basically in every single one of these movies, they stereotype African tribes and like fucking Iraq areas. It's weird. Well, not the original movie, but
So
yeah,
Iraq inside the original, that's actually authentic.
yeah, that's authentic. Cause
They actually
they went
went
to
to Iraq. The studio didn't think that they'd be able to go to Iraq due to the hostile relations between the U.S. and Iraq, but the government actually agreed after like hearing out exactly what they wanted to do there
yeah no, and
and
apparently
for what.
the Iraqis all they wanted to know about was how to make fake blood. So that's great. That's all they wanted to learn from the film crew. As long as they could work together, that's all they wanted from the experience. So yeah, I
You
guess
know
they
what?
got what
That's
they
probably
wanted.
all I wanted as well.
That's all I would want.
Um,
Yeah.
I guess I'll also touch on the hypnotism aspect of the movie. That was very, very briefly shown in the original film. Hypnosis was very briefly featured when evaluating Reagan
Uh huh.
before the exorcism was approved.
That's true. Yeah.
But at the same time, it was such a minor element. Why would you
And
make
it's
this
also
the center
portrayed
focus of the
realistically,
sequel?
and also doesn't show a scene where the demon literally comes out of like Reagan and also touches her boob. So there's a big difference between the way they present these two things.
One of them is way more realistic. The other one has you asking, is this really meant to be a sequel to The Exorcist?
Yeah, the other psychosis scene feels like a psychosexual scene. I don't get what the fuck is happening there. I don't get why that is
Oh,
happening. For some reason, one of my notes says Reagan becomes Pigeon Woman in Home Alone 2. I don't know what that means. I think. Oh wait, no. Now I remember, because for some reason their balcony has just an open space where they can just fall off any time, and then she almost falls off, and she heard a clear scream, but then for some reason Reagan doesn't remember, even though she reacted like it was Reagan didn't know what's happening because it was after she was unpossessed and she's like, oh no, but then she somehow doesn't remember that, and for some reason is now playing with pigeons, or is that a possessed Reagan? I have no idea. But for some reason, possessed Reagan or whatever Reagan was playing with pigeons. So I guess I wrote down in my notes, Reagan becomes the pigeon woman in Home Alone 2. So I guess I figured that out now. Okay.
You know what? If it just makes the movie more bearable to think about, I will accept it.
There really
I
should be a sequel where Linda Blair plays the Home Alone 2 character, the pigeon woman. Uh,
it's just like I can't think of anything positive about this movie aside from like the surface level. Some of the acting was good and some of the
I
makeup
wouldn't
was
even say
good.
that. Because, like I said, Richard, whatever guy, he looks like. Me and Silver joked around that he was like the meme where this Chad dude is just looking left and without any expression in his eyes. That's basically his whole expression throughout the movie. He looks bored throughout the entire thing. And every actor like speaks dialogue because the dialogue is so bad. And just to add to it, the director is also very bad. So they all sound like robots, and it's really fucking weird. I don't know why they sound like that, but it just they keep going on about like random bullshit, and I'm just kind of drowning out the noise. And every time I do, I feel much better in life to just joke around about the movie. Because I could just pretend the locusts are just fapping towards the camera, because that's a lot more entertaining to think about than to think about how they actually made it, where they just put a fly on a green screen. And
It sure beats just thinking about the whole plot line of the locust swarm and how that pretty much never actually comes into play later on in the movie.
locusts surround the body of Pazuzu, and then Pazuzu says, "I am Pazuzu." Even though the whole point of the original movie is that you don't know what the demon's name is, you don't need to know the demon's name, and
It's
plus,
not important at
it's
all.
Pazuzu. Who wants to say that seriously? Pazuzu. Like, Jesus Christ. I think the original film could have pulled it off, but even then, it'd feel off. I don't care about the fact that Pazuzu is Pazuzu. I don't care. You think I give a shit? I don't. And basically, one of my examples of how bad the dialogue is "Hello, devil. You have done blank, and you're capable of blank. We have to stop him from doing blank with blank," because the movie over explains itself because it's showing what's happening. But unlike the original film, it's not implying these things. It's just telling you these things are happening because the film's visual language is already so bad that I can't tell
Tell
what's
don't
going
show,
on.
you know?
Yeah. Oh my god. I'm exhausted
Jesus
just thinking about this
Christ.
movie. It's so bad. Uh, I'm looking through these
Uh,
notes to try to specify what's going on. And yeah, another thing is the sound design is so much worse because it's just so goofy. I don't get what's happening. It feels just not cohesive tonally, and it
yeah,
doesn't
I
feel like it's
remember hearing
understanding
like
anything.
Saturday morning cartoon sound effects showing up. Like I couldn't tell you like specifics because like God forbid my mind actually remembers things happening in this movie, but I distinctly remember like stuff that made me go, wait, is this supposed to be taken seriously?
Oh, do you remember the random tap dancing scene, and then that parallels to like another scene, and they quick cut between these two things, and then she messes up her tap dancing, and that's meant to indicate that the possession is connected across like lands. It's weird, but yeah, there's
What
just
the
random.
hell?
You don't remember that the tap dancing? It was great.
Like I said, this movie is like a fever dream to me where I remember aspects of it and I remember the pain of it, but I think my mind is actively trying to forget it ever happened.
Yeah, I'm trying to forget, but I can never forget the random tap dancing. It's great. It's one of the best scenes in the movie because it's so stupid. And trust me, I believe you when I say fever dream because I stayed up with Silver to watch this. I was I think I was just losing it because we started singing the best song ever made, Marvel musical. Great song. It's one of my favorite songs. But yeah, the whole movie is just doesn't feel cohesive, so I can't blame you for not remembering much about it. And my notes end with "Man eats sandwich to DC." I don't know what that means, so I'll just leave it at that. Cause the endings, they go to the house, and then the house falls apart, and locusts like surround the house, and then Reagan stops the locusts with her powers, and that's it. That's the end.
Uh, I guess the only other thing that I have to add to this is, as we have alluded to, uh, Mr. Martin Scorsese very much enjoys this movie and it prefers it over the original. Made a statement on this film that reads, "The picture asks, does great goodness bring upon itself great evil? This goes back to the book of Job. It's God testing the good. In this sense, Reagan is a modern day saint, like Ingrid Bergen in Europa 51, and in a way, like Charlie in Mean Streets. I like the first Exorcist because of the Catholic guilt I have."
What?
What?
I don't.
And because it scared the hell out of me, but the heretics surpasses it. Maybe Borman failed to execute the material, but the movie still deserved better than it got. No, it didn't.
No, it did not.
And what?
Just so you know,
What?
the original script that they were given was probably good, but then Borman rewrote it like 7,000 times during filming, especially that climax. That was not the original ending. So, Scorsese, no, this is not a well thought out film, and I don't think it's right. And I think I may also have an explanation for the sexual elements, because the movie that Borman is most famous for, Deliverance, which was nominated for Best Director and Best Picture, has a rape scene. So,
Jesus
that
Christ.
probably explains it. So,
Why? It's
fuck.
it's like spit on your grave all over again. I mean, hopefully it's at least not like 20 minutes long like in that movie, but still, do we have to visually show that stuff? Can we not just allude to it? Some things are just not meant to be shown on camera, you know?
I sometimes wish Borman really did bore me. But no, this movie fascinates me all the hell because Jesus Christ.
This movie blows.
Oh my god. I'm trying to look through these notes if I really do have anything else to say. But I'm just,
I'm all out.
I'm all out.
Marty, his quote is all I wanted to mention. It just straight up makes no sense. I could break it down, but like at this point, what's the point? We all know it's bad.
And
All of the
then,
people who think that they're special for liking the movie and thinking it's secretly good are just stupid.
they're like the
It's
type of
not.
people who like Death Grips, but not because they like the music, but just because it looks different, because it feels different. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. It's like it's one thing to like a bad movie and think it's actually good. I can understand that sometimes, whether it be from like an ironic enjoyment or humorous perspective, or because I do think that there's good elements in it that are just overshadowed by other elements I don't like. Here, though, it's like there are no good elements. And any possible good elements I can think of are way better in other Exorcist related media. So there's no point.
There's
There is
ideas.
no
It's
point.
it's like saying it's like saying the prequels had original ideas. It's like saying
Yeah,
that. Who the fuck says shit like that? Like, I'm sorry, I have to
we
use the
all
Cosmonaut quote here, but who
we
the
can
fuck says
literally
shit like
make
that?
the we can literally do the cosmonaut quote in regards to Exorcist 2 because it's like we all agreed this movie was bad once upon a time, and now people think it's good all of a sudden.
What the fuck
What the
happened?
Oh
Oh my
man,
god.
Marky, you need to watch this movie at some point just so we can know your divine thoughts on this film.
I
So you
believe
can
I believe in the
make a
Cosmonaut.
video on it.
You know what? Cosmonaut would not like Exorcist III. I'm betting on this. I'm
He
betting
would
on that.
hate it. In stark contrast to me, who loves Exorcist 3.
Well, speaking of which, there's the Exorcist III.
Exorcist.
Great
A
movie.
really weird title for this movie since it is not a direct sequel to
Yeah.
to Exorcist 2.
Blatty did
This
not want that
is
title. They wanted it to be called Legion, the book it's based on. But oh well.
yeah, yeah. Which cool thing there? The title of that book is specifically based off of probably the most famous account of an exorcism being performed in the Bible, where Jesus removes this group of demons that is inhabiting this one individual.
Oh.
This demon is really really well known in the Christian mythos.
Mm.
In Castlevania, it is seen as this giant floating mass of bodies in a spear. Uh, One of the coolest designs in the entire franchise, in my opinion. Uh, and this movie does encompass that kind of idea very well with its main antagonist. The first film is all about uh, the innocent being possessed. This one's all about the wicked being possessed.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I like the way the original movie does do the innocence angle. I neglected to mention that. I'm glad you brought it up because it's well done, and the fact that 3 translates that to a more adult element where it's like these people have matured. They're fully grown adults who are now experiencing the same things that a child did, and not just that, but the adult who's experiencing this is meant to be the well, it's basically a stand-in for the Zodiac killer, but yeah, it's I find that a really neat concept in general. Blatty is not the best director in the world, but he has some of this movie looks really good. I really like
Yeah,
some of it.
definitely in a lot of the dialogue scenes, it's kind of clear that he's definitely shooting it as if with full attention on a character speaking, translating it from book to
He's
text.
a novelist at
Um,
heart, so of course he
but
likes
also
to
like the
embellish the
difference
language.
here, I think, is that he is also a visionary who like actually knows exactly what he wants to be presented. I can
Yeah,
compare this to like the Fantastic Beasts movies, which were those screenplays were written by a novelist who simply tried to write them like novels and tried having directors frame it like novels instead of actually putting focus on the cool stuff in the
see, this
sequels.
is why I appreciate William Peter Blatty because he specifically chose Friedkin. He knew exactly what he wanted from Friedkin for Friedkin to do whatever he wants because they understood each other perfectly. And without
Yeah,
him, he still can make a great movie. So
mm-hmm.
that's cool. I
Because he knows exactly what he wants to be presented,
yeah
and he knew that Freakin knew exactly what needed to be presented and how it should be presented in an interesting way. In a lot
yeah
of ways, I'd probably say that Blady took a lot of inspiration from his time working with Friedkin in terms of depicting this movie,
yeah.
which I'm sure one could say is a little bit lazy on his part. I think it's a really interesting way of actually connecting the two from a stylistic perspective, while also not making it feel derivative of one another.
Oh no, this movie is nowhere. It's a lot more. It's a lot more expressive, not just by language, but also by the way it invokes its kills. It's a lot less natural, and it's a lot more symbolic, which I think works because it still has logic to it, and it still works in where it's going, and still fits into the general timeline of The Exorcist. And if we
Mm-hmm.
just forget Exorcist 2 exists and call Exorcist 3 Exorcist 2, we're all good. We're actually all good, or just change it to Legion, even better, and we'd still
Uh,
have a solid timeline here.
Very much. I think it's 100% the decisions. Like, I don't even know who made the bright choice of calling this Exorcist 3. It's like nobody liked Exorcist 2. This has absolutely nothing to do with Exorcist 2. We're
Eh,
not playing with Castlevania here, or any video game where you can call it a numbered system, even though they're technically not direct sequels. and it works because of the shared attributes. Because you're telling stories here,
Yeah.
people are going to expect that this is a continuation of the last story,
Damn you,
especially since the last story had the same characters as the first film.
damn you, nameless executive, fucking stupid ass bitch. So yeah,
Pretty sure it harmed the box office
it
by at
did.
least like
Even if it's
80
made its,
million.
even if it doubled its budget back, that's still not great.
It
It's
could have done way better
could have
if
done
it
way
just
better.
had not been named Exorcist III.
My God. Sometimes I
But
wish.
hey, the good news now is that this one is also, I wouldn't necessarily say its cult following is becoming as vocal as Exorcist II's is, but it's definitely receiving a large resurgence in
I think
popularity
I think The
from a
Exorcist 3
large
still
group of
has a
people.
I think has a larger amount of cult following than even like Exorcist 2. I've heard people way more talk about this one than Exorcist 2. I think Exorcist 2 is was way more talked about in the age of the rage critic, like nostalgia critic, the cinema snob. Those guys have videos on those movies because those are infamously bad movies. But
Mhm.
we don't like to talk about infamously bad movies. Well, sometimes, but now we have cult hits like The Exorcist 3, and
If
it's great.
anything, I think we've left an era of anger and torment, probably because of world events. We've moved past that and more towards a desire to see things praised and appreciated,
Well, yes, the
which I
world
mean,
is
personally, I like that.
well, yes, the world is still a fucking shit place. We're out of the post 9/11 world, so
Hmm.
we're going out of that. Even though we are still at war in multiple places, and it's really disturbing. But
But at
that's
this
that's fine.
point, like everybody has been so, even more than usual, people have been really, really down. So I think talking about things and giving appreciation to things is just on the rise because that's what people want to see more so nowadays in comparison to
I don't even
yesterworld.
have much notes on the production side because it was generally mostly a smooth production. Besides the reshoots and title, it's just a very clean, well done, like tight thriller. I love
It's simply
Brad.
just like a movie I just love an incredible amount and will almost certainly be rewatching in the coming weeks. And it's just something that I enjoyed so much.
Oh
Um,
yeah, no
Nothing more really to that.
George C. Scott, he's so good in it. Brad Dourif, he's so good. Because I know like people associate Brad Dourif with mostly Chucky, but he is a genuinely great actor, and he's so good in this. And I love him in like every role he's been in for the most part. Even in he's in the Rob Zombie Halloween films. He's okay in those. I don't hate him in them. And
Hmm.
I don't know why. I just really like Brad Dourif in this movie, and I like the way they do the multiple personalities angle in this. Because, it could be easily really cheap. But the way they represent it visually is so cool to me because, like, they cover it up, and then, the way they use the straightforward shot where we just see Brad Dourif's face, like, directly at us, like, looking at us, is so well done, and that entire, like, conversation is so well done as well. It's a lot more written like a novel, but it still has that powerful visual to it all, and it's so well done.
I
Yeah.
think like one of the other little silly things that I noticed when watching it, it doesn't play for long and only plays at the beginning of the movie, but Blatty played a snippet of Tubular Bells. Exorcist 2 has no tubular bells to be found. Um,
Hmm.
Pre 2 weeks ago, I would say every Exorcist movie that features tubular bells is the good one. Every other one's the bad one. I can't say that anymore, uh,
Oh.
but
Oh.
it used to be the case. If you had tubular bells, you were the good Exorcist movie.
Well, anyway, this movie we could continue to talk about it. It's so good. I don't think it's like the greatest. I don't think it's greater than the first movie, but it is easily like the only other Exorcist sequel I will. Well, the only other Exorcist thing I'll even think about in this entire franchise, because it tried so many things I didn't think that The Exorcist would do, and it's definitely way more interested in the religion aspect of it. Not that the first one wasn't, of course it was like a lot, but this is such a heavy usage of it. Two is a lot more about hypnotic shit. It's really stupid, but this one properly
It goes back
continues
to the faith
like,
angle of the
yeah,
first film and elaborates on it, which that's what a sequel's supposed to do. It's supposed to elaborate even more on the themes and ideas of the
George
first
C.
film.
Scott's character is so nihilistic. He's just so painfully just like assistant to the world. He doesn't attempt to challenge it, and every time he does, all his anger just he keeps it all in, and it's just so well done. And George C. Scott is so good in acting all this out, and I don't think anyone else would be able to do it besides him. He's really good in it. I it's very simple plot wise, and it doesn't really move from place to place. It's mostly one location, and it's a lot more of a subjectively shot. It's a lot less documentarian, and a lot more cinematic, and a lot more perspective shifting, and there's a lot more of expressive color palette to it as well. I appreciate that as well, and it's probably, I guess, the most explicitly expressively shot Exorcist sequel, I think. Well, besides two, but in its own weird way, so that doesn't count. Um,
Exorcist 2 doesn't exist, so we can ignore that one.
yeah, I just don't believe it exists. I don't think it's worth anything. I
Pretty
gave it
much
a
everything ignores its existence, so
I
it's
gave it
like
a
we have no
one.
reason.
I gave it a one, but I have no reason to like it in any way. Oh, that's for later. But yeah, Exorcist III, good. Mm.
Very much so. I'm very happy with the movie, very satisfied with the
So,
movie.
I think you said it was better than the first one. Would you care to elaborate on that?
I mean, I personally just enjoyed it overall more,
Mm.
uh, in a consistent kind of way. Um, Again, it's like with the first film, I have the small
More
little gripe
respect to
of
it, and more with small
it's
gripes.
it's more difficult for me to get into the first film just because of the slowness of specifically the first
Hmm.
10 minutes of the movie. When the actual like story beat starts up, that's when I get engaged with the movie, but it's tricky for me to get into. This one is more consistent throughout. I was fully engaged the entire time. I very much enjoyed myself and
Hmm.
admired so many aspects of the film, similarly to the first one. Um, the first one outdoes it in terms of like some of its spectacle and the technical aspects of the movie. But that's not to say that this one doesn't have some great spectacle. That climax is so good, so bombastic and big and terrifying and dangerous in all of the ways that I'd want to see in a follow up that I kind of saw in the climax of two, except in two, it also felt like a headache, partly because of everything building up to it.
Yeah,
This one, though, didn't have that issue.
it's. I think I've heard like during Red Letter Media's review of it that Exorcist III feels more accessible. It feels like it fits right in with modern audience standards, and that's why it's aged so well, because it's not just timeless, but works for a modern audience as well. And I can understand that. And if you like Exorcist III more than the first one, I honestly don't mind that. Usually in cases like these, sequel. If you think this sequel is better than the first one, not I can understand why, but I just don't see it. This I could easily see why you would like way more like this one than the other one, and I'm
I
just
think it's
glad
also
there's just a good
very much
horror
important for
horror
me
film
to
still
say that
exists. Yeah.
I love this film, but I also still just really love the first film as well. It's not like one of my favorite movies of all time or anything, but I do still really, really love the first Exorcist. It's
Yeah. I mean,
not
Exorcist 3
like
would
I'm
not work
one
without
of
the first movie anyway, so like,
yeah, yeah, I'm not a weirdo who only likes this one and only kinda or just straight up does not like the first one. No,
no,
no.
no, no,
I
no.
like I really, really like both movies.
Yeah. It's,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just glad a good horror movie sequel exists because there's so few of those things. I can never think of any that can do this, and I'm shocked by it. But
I mean, there's like the Evil Dead sequels.
like
I guess you could argue Aliens, but Aliens is way more action than
Aliens
horror,
is an
so I don't
action
really
movie.
count
It's
it.
not even horror. It's barely it.
Um, I
Um,
mean, there's some horror sequels that I know of that are like fun, but I wouldn't necessarily call them like particularly amazing. Not in the same vein as like the Evil Dead sequels
mm,
or Exorcist III. And I'm sure I'll find some in the future. There's a couple franchises that I haven't sunk my teeth deep into that I think have the potential. Like the Ringu franchise, I do think has the possibility of
yeah,
having some really, really strong sequels.
I'll get into those soon. Actually, I was planning on it, so that's gonna be great. This well, now I'm stuck with podcast demands, but yeah, this movie's great. This movie's great.
Mhm.
And then we have it just wasn't enough, was it? It wasn't satisfying.
Nope,
Nope.
not at all.
It was
WB
about
had this brand and they thought, hey, so you remember how they mention in The Exorcist that Father Merrin had an encounter with an exorcism previously?
let's make a whole movie about that. Like
Yep,
that's great. And also we're gonna scrap the original cut and release an entirely different cut that was reshot for 90% of it.
because
Directed
we
by
didn't like the
Die
original
Hard
cut of
2,
the
Die
movie.
Harder. Yeah, not that guy. Wow. And now
I,
we have Exorcist the beginning, and we have Dominion, a prequel to The Exorcist. They are.
which we might as well talk about at the same time because it's the exact same story and they follow basically the exact same plot beats that are like changed. They are altered like kind of significantly, but they move in the exact same direction. So like they're basically the same movie.
They're the same. They're exactly the same. I don't know anyone else who would say otherwise. Because genuinely, these two movies blend together for me. If you see anything that's different, it's mostly stylistically, and they present more stupider, fucking conflicts. But they're both basically just eh.
It's like most people seem to agree that Dominion is like slightly better than the beginning, but like even then, it's not really by much. It's like I think Dominion is like more engaging, but they're still boring and dumb and completely pointless.
For
Like
sure,
they
isn't.
add nothing to the mythos of The Exorcist. The idea of like developing Father Merrin as this fractured servant of God, the way that Father Karras was,
Is
if anything, I think
pointless.
actually like breaks a lot of his
It's
character from the original
pointless
film.
because
I
he
understand like the intentions behind it because it's clearly supposed to try and create an even stronger parallel between the two, showing what would have been if Father Karras actually conquered his own personal struggles with faith during the exorcism. But like the execution is so bad.
well basically what happens is they take they just take Father Marin, and just turn him into Karis without doing anything interesting to parallel them. There's so slight differences between their different journeys besides where they go. It's just kind of the same thing, and they characterize
Yeah,
them the same, and it feels just not right with me, and it's weird.
like there's no reason for you to develop Father Marin as being a fractured servant the way that Karis was. It's not needed. You can tell a very compelling story by showing the opposite angle of someone who does believe fully in faith and maybe is challenged by their full belief in faith. Because you can do that. You can very much challenge someone who fully believes in a faith when everything around you is trying to tell you otherwise. The Nazis
See,
are telling you that God is not here. the African tribes people are telling you that no higher being has really answered to them due to all of their oppression and all that,
See, everything
but
that they
it
try to
never
do
does.
are basically the same from both movies. The beginning is just a lot more excessive with its editing, and it's also just glossing over aspects. And then the original cut, still bad. It's just very, very flatly presented as to what the conflict is. What you're saying, it sounds a lot more interesting than what the movie's actually doing, and
Hmm.
it's certainly tried, but it feels like it was written specifically by a nihilist without understanding the different perspective of a Christian. And it just doesn't feel right as to like what it actually is trying to say. And it's weird because Paul Schrader also made First Reformed, which is apparently one of the greatest like religious films ever. So like I don't know what happened here.
Crazy, just like a crazy character arc that took place over the course of like 7 years or something.
I guess he changed his mind on it. But yeah,
I suppose so.
yeah, The
But
Exorcist, the beginning, the only difference between the two ways they film it is one has a piss filter and features scenes of a fucking war that is shot like it's like Lord of the Rings. It's so weird. I'm like disoriented. It's like, this is what The Exorcist is now? It's like Lord of the Rings? What's going on? And it's like they're presenting like these giant myths and legends and like, this is The Exorcist. Calm yourself. Humble
if
yourself.
anything, I'm really hoping that like one of the next steps forward is going to be like the resurgence in smaller productions really gaining a lot of notoriety. Like that happened in the 70s to 90s. Bring that
Bring
era of
back,
filmmaking back.
bring back mid-budget movies, please. For the love of God, I need those back.
Simplicity is good. Not everything needs to be this big epic thing that's making a statement.
The
It's like The
Exorcist is one of
Exorcist
the
made
was
a
the most
statement.
successful movie ever made at the time, and it's a simple movie. It's very simple,
It,
actually.
it technically made a statement, yeah, but it was also, get this, subtle. These movies aren't subtle. These prequels are very, very blunt with these ideas about anguish and war and racism and that all
See,
being bad and stuff.
so you could easily tell that these other movies are about faith, but the first one, if you were to ask a regular audience member back then, they don't they don't immediately understand what's happening because on a base level they're just scared of the movie and that this movie has this reputation. And for those who think the movie's boring, that's because they just don't understand the message quite yet. And so they're just thinking this is the Exorcist movie where an exorcist happens. And that's all they have to base themselves off on without paying attention to what the rest of the film is offering. And even the first two thirds before the Exorcist happens, they're quite subtle in trying to explain why this is happening or why this character's like this, but they don't directly link them as a thematic element. Unlike this, where these two sequels are linking all this flashbacks and there's like a prison and that Father Marin's also like Karis and that this is happening. And Exorcist III, even for his bluntness, is subtle and tries something, and it can be better than its obvious message, but if you just have the obvious message without the good filmmaking or the well written shit, you have these two prequels and they're just worthless. They try something, but I don't think anyone talks about them. No one.
It's just all
No one.
pointless. It's just like
Pointless.
they don't add anything to the mythos of The Exorcist. All of the rituals being done is all the same stuff done in the first film, so we don't see a new angle there. Anything that they attempt to develop, it doesn't go anywhere. It, mildly enjoyable, I suppose, from my perspective, but like, I'm never going back to these things. I'm never going to.
No, I don't think I can even imagine thinking about the beginning. See,
It
see, I
could
can.
be worse.
It's kind of like
There's two other movies that
it's
are
kind of like
worse.
episode 10 of this podcast, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequels. I'm only gonna think about the first two. I'll remember all their titles. I'll remember the podcast episode I did on them, but I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about them. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I don't.
Uh-huh.
I don't give a shit.
And it's the same way here. My letterbox review for Dominion was simply just me recapping the insanity of this entire franchise and how there's three direct sequels that all have nothing to do with each other and are all in separate timelines. And then there's two prequels that are technically actually the same movie that also don't connect to
There's two
any of the
alternates to a
films.
flashback to the first movie, but I don't like them, so I don't count them.
Oh.
And I guess we
And
have to
then,
talk about Believer.
oh my god, Jesus Christ.
Anyway, I'm gonna read a sort of paraphrase version of what Mark what Mark Kermone said about this movie. One of the problems of all the Exorcist spin-offs, exception of the Exorcist III, written by and directed by William Peter Blatty, is that they have completely misunderstood the original. So the message of the original, amongst the many messages, is that it's not about the girl. It's about everybody else in the house. It's about the priest. Also, message about the original. You don't tell the audience what the message of the original is. They have to feel it. That's kind of the essential to the thing. So, Exorcist 2, worst movie ever made, he said. It's all about a girl. Let's piss on a leopard and get on the back of a locust and fly to Africa. Exorcist Dominion, the most boring movie ever made. Exorcist the Beginning, the stupidest horror movie ever made. And now we have this, The Exorcist Believer, by David Gordon Green, which it would like for us to see as a requel, a reboot, from the makers of the Halloween reboot series. This is better seen as a requel by the director of Pineapple Express. Although, I should say, it's less funny, and indeed, less scary, than either of those movies. It is not good. That is one of my favorite excerpts from a review, and Mark Cremone infamously loves The Exorcist. It's his favorite movie ever made. He's behind the festival version, which is the extended cut of like the original documentary that has a lot of dense knowledge of what was happening behind the production. So yeah, he's a
Ooh.
big fan of the movie. So now that he's seen this movie, he criticizes basically every aspect and gives sympathy to Ellen Burstyn, who sadly appears in this movie as a sort of Jamie Lee Curtis
She said
version
in an interview that
for
the
this
only
movie.
reason she's in this movie is because there's nobody else still alive to be in her place.
But
Except that Reagan is still alive,
Reagan's
Linda
still
Blair
alive,
is still alive,
and
and as
she's
this
here.
movie shows, she's here. Um, so I think I'm sorry, I think you're just misremembering things, but there is someone still alive, and they could have used her instead. I would have preferred for them just to not make this movie and add in. Oh, okay. I guess we should start from the beginning.
Okay.
Not the Exorcist beginning, but the beginning of this one.
All
Okay.
right.
So,
You can explain.
The Exorcist Believer. This is definitely a David Gordon Green production. If you've seen, he's very much trying to do his Halloween 2018 thing. And as a half Halloween 2018 defender, he's trying to actually no, I think he said in an interview
He's
that
applying a
he's trying to
concept
do
to.
the opposite of
Wait,
what he
what?
did inside this movie.
What?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I remember now. He said that he was trying to do the opposite.
Of Halloween
Um,
2018.
yes, which he focused more so on the aspect of quote unquote fan service, where he said that the only like Easter eggs that he includes inside this movie are things that only like mega fans would understand. And I mean, I really didn't catch anything after
I didn't
seeing the
even
entire
try. I didn't
franchise,
even try to catch anything. I didn't bother.
but there was absolutely nothing like super obvious, like how Halloween three's masks were featured in Halloween Kills. Nothing of that sort is featured in this movie. Um, but at the same time, I think he's also trying to be like Halloween 2018 because
No, it's very
like
clear he was trying to
when
do that. He's like translating the formula to an Exorcist sequel. But you're not just you can't just do that though. You just can't do
it's
that.
like the big thing that I focus on here is like Kristen McNeil's entire half barren story arc that they're trying to put in is literally a repeat of what they did with Laurie in Halloween 2018, but with none of the intrigue that her character had me gripped with in that film. Because that was the part of 2018 that I actually really liked. There was this really, really interesting connection that Laurie had with her daughter, with how the trauma of Michael Myers' his rampage traumatized her, and how she was determined that he would return for her one day, and she needed to be ready, and how that fractured her relationship with all of her family, and how that gets developed throughout the movie. Here, they try doing a similar thing where McNeil writes a book about Reagan's exorcism without her permission, which,
But that's
first of
not
all,
what Chris
that's
would
not a
ever do.
comparable thing.
Chris McNeil
McNeil,
is not anything like Laurie Strode. Like, yeah,
first
she
of all,
she
like Laurie
experienced
was a
all of this.
teenager when
Yeah, exactly.
that
She experienced
happened.
this as a teenager, so of course she'd be traumatized by this. But this is a full
It would be more
adult.
lasting there. Like
It's a
the
full
whole thing
adult.
with Exorcist II developing a storyline with Reagan having trauma, that makes more sense than Chrissy writing a book here. Because like
Yeah,
Reagan, she was a little child. She was 12 years old when this happened.
yeah.
Like that kind of traumatic event would have a lasting effect on
Yeah, but this
someone's
is a full
soul.
adult who cared about Reagan so much, and also specifically didn't want the public to know about this. In every interview she did, she didn't even mention it, and she wanted to spend some time alone to get to understand what's happening to Reagan without anyone having to know about it. But in this, oh, she just blatantly, uh, like autobiography makes this whole thing and makes it a spectacle, which is not what Chris would ever do. That's not who she is. That's not
And the way
how
that
she
she like
characterized it.
describes how Reagan was immediately upset with her and she was rightfully upset. It was like, yeah, that's true. But like this shouldn't be a hindsight is 2020 kind of thing. This should be a thing of it's like imagine you're a parent and your child is in the hospital for a long period of time and it was a very traumatic experience for them. Would you want to write a novel about that?
Nope.
A biography of some sort as a parent and publish that to the world, risking the possibility of people only knowing your child as being the person who was possessed by a demon, supposedly, and maybe getting mocked at throughout their entire professional life
It's kind of
because of
ironic
this?
because this is a resurrection of a franchise that should have died by its third film. So,
Yeah,
yeah. And the fact is that
this movie offers nothing.
the
It just
film
straight up
undermines that.
offers nothing.
It undermines that aspect, and overall, the thematic cohesion of the movie does not exist because you have these two parents, these two white parents, and how they're like have this entitlement, and then later that mistake causes the father to choose one of them, which later becomes the reason why his daughter's dead, and we're meant to sort of learn about how this is not a good idea. And then there's also a theme of trauma where the black girl's mom died after she was birthed, and now the father has to take care of him, and that could be an interesting character to explore, the father. But no, we learned even though it tries to focus in on the fatherhood aspect and like the parenthood, specifically the parents and less about the priest. they still fail at that. Surprisingly, for an actor who was in Hamilton, Leslie Odom Jr., he is boring in this. He has nothing to do, and in fact, he is quite literally just protective dad. That's all he is in the movie.
The movie
And
attempts to try and
yeah,
create this quote unquote interesting scenario where the white couple is incredibly religious, and then Leslie Odom Jr. absolutely does not care whatsoever when it comes to
and they're
religion
basically
and
trying to do what they
spiritualness.
did with Chris McNeil, but with Leslie Odom Jr., except they fail at that.
Leslie Odom Jr.'s character is literally just another repeat of Father Karras's arc, but with nothing.
With
Just
nothing,
nothing.
there's no indication of how he feels about anything besides the fact that, oh no, my daughter's in possessed. That's it. That's all we know how he feels about anything. We don't have any scenes with just him because he always has to be by his daughter or talk to the parents. Where he it's basically whenever he's putting up a front. When we
And
never
then
see
his
a
entire
truly honest character
motivation
from
is
him.
also so incredibly weak
Yeah.
because it just boils down to I was a skeptic, and then my wife died in the 2010 Haiti earthquake, which, by the way, the scene depicting that event at the beginning of
It's
the
so bad.
movie
So bad.
is so incredibly distasteful. Like,
First of
genuinely
all,
speaking,
the visual
that
effects
event.
look so bad. Second of all, like the way they portray it just doesn't seem real, and it feels like it's embellishing every aspect of it, and it feels just disrespectful in general.
Like,
Like,
I think a lot of people just don't quite realize just how bad the Haiti earthquake was, and just how awful of a situation it placed so many people. So many died. So many communities crumbled due to this thing. Relief basically never came because of course it didn't. Uh, it took I think they're still in the process of trying to rebuild from that event.
still,
And then they just
damn,
depict it as if it's an important event for this one character. It's, if
selfish.
anything, it's, I can, like, I think the best thing for me to compare it to is Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor,
Uh,
because that's what it feels like. It feels like this isn't being depicted as a national tragedy, but instead as a vehicle for a character's arc, which is the worst way to go about depicting a national tragedy.
mm,
And again, is his uh, Odom Jr.'s arc is, it is even more
worthless.
pathetic than
Worthless.
Father Marin's repetition of Father Karras's arc in the prequels. There's even less for him to really go off because, like with Father Marin, at least he saw like the horrors of the Nazi Party doing things and has a reason to be skeptical of God's existence because it's like, well, if God was here, he would have struck down all of the Nazis and caused torment on them and protected all of his loyal subjects. Here, however, it's just my wife died and now I'm sad. And like, yeah, that's a very unfortunate thing, but that is such a weak motivation. It is the bare minimum.
The whole just trauma side of it just doesn't feel right in general, and it just doesn't feel developed. Then there's the fact that the way these kids disappear is they go in the woods, then they come back, and then they try to. And I don't understand the way they try to tie this all together by the end, where it's just like all religions have to fight. And then also the fact that. Um,
Especially
ha-
when it doesn't actually depict all religions.
it does
Like, I
not.
thought it was because somebody in one of the servers said that they supposedly do according to test screening results. It's only this one like kind of anonymous of African tribal group and the Christian religion of people that are doing it.
And the
But
sects
then the
of,
film is
like,
also still going to like,
Christian religions.
it's still going to like stretch it over across all religions because it's like, well, all religions have some sort of demons inside. All religions have some sorts of
I can't
ways of
believe I can
conquering it.
unironically say this, but this is the wokercist. It really is.
Like,
Because,
I'm
yeah.
just like the base way of me like explaining my anger with this movie is that The Exorcist Believer is a film that it's like a film with a menu, and that menu shows you a whole bunch of really interesting sounding dishes. But then when you ask the server for one of these dishes, they only give you half of a sample platter of it, and it ends up being so incredibly disappointing when you actually take a bite out of it. It's like the idea of creating this Exorcist sequel and having it
Hmm.
encompass a multitude of faiths in terms of its message is interesting in concept, but they do nothing with it.
It's most.
The scenes in the
It's like they portrayed
trailers
the
that they show.
priest as a sort of superhero version. There's no philosophical question between having all these priests here. It's more of a look at this, look at that,
I
look
didn't
at
even know
this,
the
look at
Christian
that.
priest was a main character until like right before the climax
Yeah,
happens.
they're
And
like,
like
I am the reason I can save everyone, and you're like, wow, what a selfish fucking narrative. And they're making her seem like
it's
she's like
also like he says that
perfect.
he says that like I can't do this because the church didn't give me permission, but I'm still going to give you the Roman text associating myself with this exorcism, and I'm still just going to hide in my car and pray the rosary, which I'm sorry, but that is the bare minimum you can do in terms of like assisting them. Just that's basically the equivalent of telling someone best of luck and calling it a day instead of actually giving them like genuine words of motivation or actually like being there for the people. No, it's just good luck, folks. I'll be here with you in my thoughts. And then he
There's
comes in. He comes in and he has like this moment where the triumphant music plays and everybody is so happy and it
and he
seems like
dies.
he's somehow single-handedly going to save everything. 2 minutes later,
He's
so
dead.
he at the beginning when he hands over the Roman text, he says, "Under no circumstances, do not touch these children." He puts his hands on both of the childs, and his head snaps because of them.
Dumb
That is
fuck.
the laziest way to remove what is supposedly, according to your script, the way to solve the problem. It is the laziest possible way. And
And
then but just like the entire movie is like this with like these ideas that seem interesting in concept, but they ultimately apply offer nothing. It's like in the trailer, the scene inside the church. Yeah, the trailer basically gives you the
the
entirety of
body and the
that scene.
blood. The body and the blood. For some
The
reason,
body and the blood.
she breaks the plates behind the church, and I'm just thinking, this is a quiet sermon, so how the fuck do you like hide that? Like she
These
broke.
walls are not very thick. People
Yeah.
would have heard like the crashing of glass
Yeah,
and
and then
china.
when she says the body and the blood, the body and the blood, like no one else is like
Nobody stands
there's
up and
nobody
does
anything.
anything.
They have to wait for the dramatic moment when the father goes through, like Catherine, stop. It's like wow, what a triumph. And it's like
And then there's
I don't care.
also the scene with like the simultaneous heartbeat, which like just the general concept here. Like on paper, the idea of, oh, but it's the exorcist, but there's two of them.
Oh my
Now it's
god.
getting out of hand.
Too
Uh
exorcist, too
that's
furious.
that's stupid. It is. But there's also like some interesting ideas you can have with like having like two demons that are like the same being. Like do a legion thing where they're two beings that are the same person. You could even try to like tie this into like like this difficult message about like the Holy Trinity and sort of tying it into that idea as being like an antichrist version of that. But
Hmm.
that scene is the most you actually get out of like this dual nature of these guys of these demons, aside from like the ultimate resolution of choose one of the girls to live and the other one will die. And allegedly, some people are making the assumption that Angela only lives because she had like the protection spell placed on her, which really, that's really what we're going to do here? Because like that's not needed. You could have
But
removed that
that
aspect of the
counters it.
story
It's weird. They
entirely.
try to insert
Also,
the Exorcist type of ending where it's like sacrifice for the greater good, but there's no greater value between the two. That's the problem.
if anything, I think it will, and like the movie actually like ruins any kind of interest because I was like going, okay, this is an interesting angle of approaching it by having all parties saying I choose neither. Like that's an interesting way, trying to actually just save both of them. But then the father just comes in and selfishly says, "No, take Catherine." It's like my
There's like a common theme of like connection through like the lights and how like that connects as like a sort of language and like the whole parenthood thing and there's a clear focus on it. But one, don't use Chris to create that conflict. Chris McNeil, she does not need to be here. Second, the mother's death seems so inconsequential because like the overall narrative does not focus on this. Third, The Exorcist was not about the girls. Does not need to be, but yet they are. They're making it seem like that way. And if you want to make a movie about the girls, then why are you focusing on such boring characters? Why is the incident based on the idea of letting children go is good, but while like that, like I don't understand what this movie's trying to say about like parents. What it's trying to say about with that ending is like, why does one of them have to die? What's the greater message? Like grief?
if anything, it actually
Like it
runs
doesn't mean
counter
anything.
to the themes that the movie is trying to promote.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if the movie is really trying to harness into this one thematic idea that that all religions are by nature the same because they all, as the movie literally spells out to the audience, all religions of help people in times of need, and they all have like the demons and all of that stuff. Then why are you going to make it so that you don't have all the religions coming together to vanquish the demons? Why does the thing need to happen? it it just it runs counter to this idea of unification by
It's
having a sacrifice
it's trying to
take
do.
place.
It really feels like the woke assist because it's like trying to appease to every single part of messages and it's doing multiple things, but they run counterclockwise to everything else, and so it's just sort of doing things and it doesn't feel cohesive. And as much as the movie looks professional, the story is a complete mess. The ending is terribly shot. I think the way it uses lights is terrible most of the time. And in fact, the trailer does more interesting visuals than this movie. The marketing does more interesting visuals than this movie.
Yeah,
It does so much more.
like, and why don't we just go over to the whole wokersis part of the movie and just talk about Christy McNeil and namely that one particular
Okay,
line that she has.
so what she says is, you want to know why I did was a part of actors? For me, I think it was the patriarchy. Such a stupid line, first of all, because first of all, you asked for them. You asked for the Exorcist after going through many trial and error. You wanted to save your child. You tried your best. They don't undermine Chris as a sort of just female in trouble. No, she tried her best.
She's an active character. She
She
asserts herself multiple times. If anything, this is like she's
she's
actually like
the
the
most progressive character.
more of she's a progressive, like strong female character in the sense of she she has a problem and she is actually working to solve that problem. She's not trying to
See, the
wait for
males
someone
in
to
this
bring it
movie are truly the
in.
weakest in the movie because even
They're the
Reagan,
ones that have the most issue. They're the ones that are suffering the most, that
Reagan
have
is
to actually
pure.
go through.
Reagan is pure,
Mhm.
and then when she's possessed, she has all the power in the entire room. So, really, it's a feminist movie. Well, not really, but you
It's
get what?
more so a feminist movie than it is like a patriarchal movie.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
definitely. But it's not
the
focusing on
all
that
of
gender
the
issues. It's not focusing on that. I'm just saying that as
it's
a
not
joke. I mean,
at
it's
all.
not really about feminism. Of course, that'd be really stupid.
Well, no,
Yeah.
it's like I can see the angle being approached that way. It's just like this
If we're talking
movie,
about
the
like,
believer trying to create this angle with
if
this
we're talk,
movie being sexist,
no.
though it completely undermines everything McNeil
If
does
you're
in the
talking about
movie.
like pure gender, like power in the original, the females win in that aspect. But
Hmm.
if we're talking on what that means to the overall original movie, it means nothing. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And another
In the
thing she
original
says,
movie,
she's,
McNeil has an experience with Reagan as a possessed demon, and she almost dies inside of
see what she
that
said. No,
moment.
what Chris says is she didn't witness the exorcism, but witnessed the possession, which is wrong. You did not witness the possession. You you came home to it. You don't know where it came from. You dumbass. That was
Nobody
the point.
saw the possession
Yeah.
happen because it's like we part of the horror is that we don't know what the possession looks like. We know the stages of like her becoming more and more consumed by the demonic
Just like what
force.
most of these movies fail at, they fail by explaining the horror. You're not supposed to
Yeah.
explain it. You're supposed to leave it as an ambiguous thing. And even if you do, you're only explaining the main rules, not the foundations and the details of it all, because it makes it more horrifying to witness these things happening. You having to unravel the rules of whatever greater force there is.
Hmm. And they
And
also just misinterpret like things in the movie, in the original movie, and just make themselves look stupid. It's in this movie, McNeil saying that completely undermines the fact her own experience going facing the demonically possessed Reagan. It undermines the sight that she saw after the exorcism was completed and her daughter was rid from the demon. You know, the two dead priests. Mm,
yeah,
maybe, Chrissy, maybe the reason you weren't allowed to witness possession is because both priests knew of the risk on both
yeah,
sides,
but
which,
don't
if I
worry.
remember correctly, Marin actually specifically says that there is grave risk on both sides before the possession happens.
But don't worry.
And both of them die.
Don't worry, Chris learned everything about religion afterwards. And then she goes
Yeah, she
in.
became an expert on the experts, which
Yeah.
is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
And then she goes to try to talk to the girl, Catherine, at the house, while not bringing anyone else. She just goes in there alone. And then, loses her eyes. Getting stabbed by a
Because she was
cross.
being stupid, she didn't keep her distance at all, which she should have known that kind of thing could have
And
happened because
another thing that they
she
add is
literally
she prays and she like does these rituals, but then includes Reagan in those prayers. Don't fucking do that, you dumb bitch, you dumb asshole. You're here for this girl. You're not here for Reagan. I thought you were selfless, but no, I guess you're selfish. What happened?
you're wishing for Reagan just undermines the entire experience that you were called in to help and you claim to be interested in
Yeah,
helping.
so
And
stupid.
her entire thing with Reagan, it's like so this is the other thing I have. Universal spent $400 million in order to acquire sequel rights to The Exorcist.
I wonder how that
Um,
turned out.
they got Blumhouse in order to make this movie, and they want Blumhouse to do a trilogy.
Mm-hmm. The next one
We
is
already
called
know
Deceiver,
the next
right?
one. Yeah, yeah. The
Yep.
next one is called The Exorcist Deceiver. We don't know what the third one is called. It will probably do the MCU Spider-Man thing, and have something that also rhymes in the same vein. Which, sure, I'll take that.
Deceiver, Man Eater. There we go.
Going all the way into the feminist angle on in that one.
Man Eater. They just eat all the men in that movie.
It's all about a cannibal demon.
The
Like
patriarchy's
throughout the
been
movie,
over.
throughout this movie, I was just like trying to figure out how are they going to end it so that they can carry this into three movies.
They don't.
Because with Halloween 2018, I think it was quite clear to most everyone that the movie was more so intended to be a standalone thing. It left Michael in a position where if they wanted to create a sequel, they totally could, but it was never made with the intentions of becoming a trilogy. This one is,
And it has
and
no
yet this
setup.
one wraps everything up with a neat bow. Because the exorcism happens and the demon is supposed to be gone. The Reagan comes back, so McNeil's entire thing is completely gone. Which, by the way, I also just want to mention that they could have replaced all of Chrissy's scenes with Leslie Odom Jr. just reading Father Marin's book, uh, and maybe doing like a very old YouTube interview or a radio show thing that he did. Well, I think more people would probably be okay with the radio show thing. Otherwise, they'd have to do like an insane amount of make of CG de-aging kind of stuff, like they did with Tarkin and Rogue One, or they'd have to do like AI stuff, which I don't think any of us want to see happen.
Nope. Nope, I
But
do not.
she was completely replaceable. Um, but there's literally nothing for this movie to carry on. I watched it with my grandmother, and she brought up the potential. There's a scene during the exorcism where the it was after the demon smoke thing, which I'm not even going to talk about
That
that
is
because I
so
don't
stupid. So
understand
like
like even the
it's like a
mentality
fucking like
behind that.
Marvel like VFX where like dust comes out and then it turns into smog and it looks so fake. Did I mention the CGI fire, the CGI blood, the CGI barf? It's so bad. They're
The
terrible.
movie cost approximately $5 million more than Five Nights at Freddy's.
It costs $30 million. And sadly, it already made 85 million back.
Yeah, but so one of the African zealots asked Leslie Odom Jr. to drain out some like sacred juice stuff into one of the drain. So that's like the only thing that I can possibly imagine
There's
them
like a
going
Teenage
off of.
Mutant Ninja Exorcist. There you go.
Just like imagine in the sequel, it's like the entire town becomes possessed because of this
Oh my
demon
god!
water.
My mother and my father are
Like, I
demons?
swear, that's what's going to happen. They are literally just going to make it so that
They're
the
gonna
entirety of the town is just
they're
possessed
gonna
because of demon
MCU
water.
The Exorcist. I'm so excited. Oh,
It's going to be so stupid.
I can't wait. I'm not seeing them in theaters. I'm not gonna watch them all on cam rip. Fuck that
I
shit.
saw this one in theaters and it was so painful sitting through because it's like there's genuinely nothing here of interest. I'm
Hmm.
talking about all of this stuff, but the things that I'm talking about, I don't even think it's like fascinating to look back on. It's like we're going to look at this movie in 3 years' time, and we aren't going to be discussing it in the same way that we'll be discussing the history surround and legends surrounding Exorcist II. Like that movie is horrendous, but at least there's like some intrigue in terms of like discussing things around it.
Well, now I
Around
guess
this
then it's a
movie,
matter of would you prefer something that's interestingly horrible? Do you hate something that's more interestingly horrible, or do you hate something more that's boring horrible? It's a matter of
I
that.
think I'd take the boring horrible because like what there's really nothing for me to grasp on here. I never want to watch this again, nor do I ever want to watch Exorcist 2 again. I'm sure that there's going to be some kind of future personal project or something that drags me into rewatching the Exorcist franchise. But like keep so like put this into perspective, there are currently six Exorcist movies, and only two of them are good. One third of this franchise is complete rubbish.
Just so you know, Ketchup, there was a double size amount of movies except for Texas Chainsaw, and that was even worse. So, that's great.
Really?
Well,
Oh
I mean,
my
one of
god.
them condemns the Texas Chainsaw family, so that's
Mm.
great. Uh, Man, these back to
But
these horror franchises really been miserable for me. I hope Actually, wait, no. Next week is Saw. That's even more fun, isn't it? It's more
Mm,
fun.
so much. But ultimately, I'm just morbidly curious again, this time just to see how does David Gordon Green even consider following this movie up? Like, I can't fathom how he can, like, it's supposed to be a direct sequel. How do you make a direct sequel to this that isn't just the demon is back or the demon didn't actually leave Angela? Which is like the stupid. People are going to directly compare it to Exorcist 2 because that's what Exorcist 2 did. And you don't want that. The most interesting thing around the development of this trilogy to me is how much money was spent by Universal to acquire these rights, and also the fact that David Gordon Green is currently writing both of the sequels, but allegedly he doesn't actually know if he's going to make them or not. Mostly because he doesn't know if he wants to.
Apparently, he
I
doesn't
have
want
my
to
money.
direct the second one, so.
I hope he doesn't direct them. I have my money betting that William Friedkin is haunting him right now and telling him that he better not. I'm
That's
hoping.
probably
I'm
true.
hoping that's true.
You know what? This is
Uh,
the. You know, I'm not. I'm not the most religious person. I do believe in some gods, but I will truly believe in the spirit world if David Gordon Green doesn't direct the sequels, because then I know William Friedkin did his job. He did it.
uh, I guess like the only other thing that I can really add on in terms of Believer is uh, so Halloween Horror Nights this year, The Exorcist
Hmm.
Believer is one of the haunted houses featured inside of the event.
Hmm.
And so two things to mention on this front. One, all of the merchandise had these two motifs of this horned demonic figure. It was also featured inside of the house as a costume worn by people throughout it, which that never shows up in the movie. And there's also this dual snakes image as well, which
Huh.
there's a snake that shows up twice that I guess could be seen as symbolic,
There. Wait.
but
There. I don't even remember that. What?
yeah, so there's a snake that's seen when I don't even know why I remember all of this stuff, but when Leslie Odom Jr. is looking for Angela and Catherine in the woods near the beginning of the
Uh
movie,
huh.
he turns over a rock and there's a snake behind it that hisses at him and he jumps back. Um
Oh, I think I
and
forgot that because for the first act of the movie, I was eating my lunch, so I think I just ate something while that was happening. So that's okay.
It's
Right.
all right. I think you did mention that I would be kind of needed for a recap. So here's a little bit of a recap for you. And then the second time it happens is during the exorcism, where it just flashes the image of the snake, just
Oh,
just
oh, I think I
because.
saw that. Yeah, yeah. No, that was stupid.
So like that image never actually ties back into anything. The snake never actually ties back into anything.
What a
The
shocker.
most I could really compare it to is that you could a religious person would tie it to the talking snake from that was in the Garden of Eden in the Bible, uh, which let it be known for whatever reason a lot of people think that's Satan. No, no, in the Bible is literally just a talking snake. One of the weirdest creative choices made in the Bible, if you ask me.
8 out of
Uh,
10 should have had less snakes. So-
but there's this dual snake image, and there's never an instance of two snakes inside the movie, nor is there ever an instance of a devil inside the movie. And like, yeah,
Is this from
this
a scrapped,
Halloween
like,
Horror
deleted
Nights.
scene?
So my guess is that this had to have been like concept ideas for developed ideas inside the
Well, yeah,
movie
I think you would
originally.
need to plan,
Um,
like, Halloween Horror
when the
Nights before,
film comes
like,
out, well, yeah,
yeah.
the Halloween Horror Nights event started a month before the movie happened, and merchandise had to have been planned out and manufactured way
Yo, yeah,
beforehand
no,
because
absolutely. That's how
there was
that's
merchandise
how most companies
because this
work.
merchandise was being put out
See, that's why
in like
you that's why
mid-August.
you get merchandise like Blue Shirt Bart, because that was made before the original series finally like popped out and had been fully developed in its now current form. So that's why those
Yeah,
Blue Bart shirts exist. So
there's
yeah,
a Star Wars Lego set that's like this eight-legged walker thing that never actually shows up in The Last Jedi, but was
yeah,
produced for Lego because it was very loosely based on concept art. Same with Kylo Ren's command shuttle being gray, that was concept art. Uh, I think it's the same case over here. I think like the original idea for it, and I might end up getting this physically just so that I can like watch some of the behind the scenes stuff because I really want to know more about like the making of this movie and just see if I can find out what exactly went wrong aside from David Gordon Green being on the project.
well,
Because
he went wrong as soon as you got him on
I
for it.
swear that originally there was a much stronger emphasis on like the dual nature of the demons within these kids, and that they would instead explore the idea of, well, yeah, there's two possessed children this time, but they're also acting as one being. There are interesting ideas that you can have there, but it's never explained in the movie. And then the house itself, it was lame. Like I
Eh.
think it and the Chucky house were the lamest ones for me at this event.
Oh, the Chucky
I
one was
think,
not fun. Oh,
yeah, unfortunately, it had a couple of creative ideas, which is why it's better than the Exorcist house in my mind. But it wasn't scary. The Exorcist house wasn't scary either. And like it's not me not being phased by this jump scare stuff at all. There was this one house that was themed after Yetis in a campground, and it was terrifying.
oh,
Um, but also like if the house was cool, I would have given it props for that. The Stranger Things house wasn't scary like at all, but the sets were really cool. The way that they depicted
nice.
certain scenes from from the season were just amazing. But here it's like it's the most basic way that they could depict the movie. They even completely skimp out on the church scene and the dual heartbeat scene for some reason. And they throw in these demons that pop out in between transitions because they ran out of ideas and they needed something to fill in the time, I guess. And then it ends with like this red room of the two girls running amok, I
Huh.
think, which I think is trying to like frame itself as like um an alternate ending kind of thing because the room prior does depict the only one will live scene from the end of this movie.
Uh-huh.
So it's just a confusing adaptation that wasn't scary at all. And it was just lame. This entire movie is so lame and so agonizing and so awful. And they're making two more of these things, and I just
I think they'll get worse and worse, which is why I'm a bit hesitant to give this a half star. Like,
that's my fear. Like
yeah.
I cannot see myself giving it any higher than a half star because there's literally nothing about it that I actually like aside from like Leslie Odom Jr.'s acting and the child acting. Like that was solid, I guess. But other than that, it's miserable, and I just don't understand how they're going to continue this out for two more movies. Just let the franchise die and mark it off of the first film.
Yeah.
Mm,
Oh my god. It's been an exhausting recording. We are 2 hours and 38 minutes in.
wow.
Ah,
But
man.
it's
Oh.
a frustrating franchise with the most bizarre timelines, some really fascinating behind the scenes stuff, and some of the most agonizing cinematic experiences imaginable.
They are. These movies, having to go through them was probably more miserable than Texas Chainsaw because, while yes, there's less of them, I actually care more about The Exorcist, so that just felt worse. But
Yeah, when
going
it's
back to these,
insulting the source material each so many times, and you love the source material so much, it just stings even more.
man, sometimes I wish movies just don't exist, and then life would be easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, this October there's actually probably much better movies to watch. The FNAF movie, which I think will
Killers of the
probably
Flower Moon.
there's
That's coming out. Martin Scorsese.
3 hour 27 minute epic. Go watch it. Like I don't care.
Leonardo DiCaprio allegedly is like the pinnacle of his acting career, and literally everyone I've heard has said it's amazing. The Osage have given it their seal of approval 10 times over. It just sounds like a masterpiece waiting for me to watch it.
Saw X is probably a fun movie. The FNAF movie.
I've heard it's really good.
The FNAF movie.
Um,
I at worst it could be bad but fun. At best, it could be actually pretty good. I don't know.
all I will say is that all of the trailers for Five Nights at Freddy's eclipse all of the trailers for Exorcist Believer. So by that nature, I'm already way more inclined to saying that it'll at least be
See,
enjoyable.
now we're at award season, so we'll be getting a lot more something like Scorsese movies. But we have the new David Fincher movie that's gonna be in November, and then we're gonna have
Napoleon is coming out.
yeah,
Um, Disney is going to give us Wish.
yep,
Uh, there's a new Taika movie, which I've heard questionable things about, and I'm a little hit or miss with Taika, but
new
it might be
Miyazaki
good.
movie that's gonna be great.
That's going to get released over here in the States in December.
Yeah,
Mm,
Suzumi's gonna get re-released, so you could go see that.
hey, that was a really good one. I've seen that one. That I really liked it. So I
I still
recommend
need to
you
see
guys
it.
go and get it.
I still need to see it. You could
Uh,
maybe check out older movies because the current state of cinema fucking sucks. So
there's a lot of re-releases that happen.
yeah.
One that's being advertised a lot is Back to the Future coming out I think next week
I rewatched
actually.
the first movie recently. It's fantastic. Go watch it, especially in theaters. That'd be awesome. Um, surprisingly, go to your library. There's a good DVD set, DVD rental section. They're great.
They've got a lot of classics over there.
Man, go on fucking Tubi. There's a lot of great movies there.
Tubi has Exorcist III right now.
The greatest Exorcist sequel. What a shocker. And there's even free movies on YouTube. Check out Snoop Dogg's Hood of Horror. Okay, maybe not that, but it's something else. Quality.
Universal Monster movies are out and about again, and that's going to be a fun little watch through that I'm going to be doing. I own most of them. I want to see them all. So,
Check out one of the
uh,
classic slasher franchises. As bad as they get, they can be pretty fun, and depending on like what your definition of fun is.
mhm.
There's a lot of stuff. Even Totally Killer, which you watched, was surprisingly just eh. So
I didn't like it, but like compared to Exorcist Believer, it's a godsend.
it's probably enjoyable. Maybe. Who knows? Literally, check out anything. Expand your taste. Do not watch anything from David Gordon Green anymore. I protest this man. I hope he gets I hope he gets exercised. Maybe crucified
I hope
even.
he has an early retirement. I
Uh,
wish no actual harm against him, but please
oh
stop
yeah, no,
making movies.
I
I'm
don't
begging you,
I don't threaten
please,
me.
please
Just
stop.
go back to making comedies with Seth Rogen. That should be your goal from now on. Stop making horror movies. You're not actually good at anything. Stop it.
You had something with the first half of Halloween 2018, but you ruined it with the second half of that movie, and then you ruined it even more with those sequels.
Well, that's all we have. Uh, Rest in peace, William Friedkin and William Peter Blatty. Your legacy will live on and believe. Oh, well, okay. Just check out the first and third movie. That's it.
That's all you need to watch.
That's all you really need to watch. And I think it's about time we end this. You have a bye message and anything?
Uh, your mother so sucks that smell.
And I am Pazuzu. Goodbye, everyone.